gonna steal all side, ride me, baby. I ain't never gonna stop. Come on now, baby. Ride me straight to the top. Yeah, straight to the top.
You got something to say.
Everybody's got something to say.
Right.
All right.
It's worthwhile or interesting.
1, 2, 3. Peter Piper packed the pickled peppers. Go.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Purple penis eater.
Cool, because we can line up the peas when we're doing this. Pop, pop, pop.
Penis.
Yeah. All right, so the
Penis.
audio and our mouths, we line that up.
Yeah, with penises.
Bad ideas. Good story.
Number 12.
Number 12.
Bad ideas, good stories.
Been going for a little while now. Like I think we're on our
Nice.
3rd month.
Yeah, that works out. That math works.
Yeah.
4 and 3.
4 and 3. That's that's how I figured it out.
Yeah.
I'm a mathematician actually. It's a little fact that I can add or multiply.
I'm a
single-digit numbers.
magician.
Mathematician.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. My kid, she's.
Dead silence.
So I'm worried. I'm worried about her going back to school. I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. You know?
Sure.
COVID is going, and she's had her I think 4, maybe going on 5-month summer holiday or spring and summer holiday.
Hiatus.
Yeah, and she got accepted into this weird creative action school, which is apparently for creative kids that want to like make a change in the world. It's just a 1-year program for grade 8s before they go into high school, and it's like using their art and creativity for social justice, which I thought was really, really cool. So she put in an application and got accepted.
Well, and that's probably the perfect time to do that is grade 8, right before like everything interesting about you gets squashed by everybody around you.
Brand new environment.
Whatever makes you different from everybody else. Well, get ready to trim that real quick. You're gonna want to pull that back, cover it up, put some paint on it, whatever you got to do. You got to blend the fuck in, kid.
Well, it makes me wonder.
But I think just like doing it then encourages that kind of shit, right? Before they start to really get trampled. Although I'm assuming trampling starts younger nowadays.
Yeah, I don't know.
5, 6-year-old fucking.
Or maybe the trampling is on its way out because of the new generation coming up. That's kind of what
I
I'm
don't hang
thinking.
out with any kids. You know what I mean? I got a nephew that I see every once in a while. And he's pretty cool, so I don't really know how everybody else is. Because I'm like, well, he seems cool. You know what I mean?
Like, we grew up with being trampled. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
Like,
Yes.
nonconformist, you better be conformist.
One of the funniest things you said recently was when we were talking about skateboarding, and you're like, yeah. Anyways, you can re-listen to it. I'm not trying to get canceled today.
Yeah, exactly. But that was it.
But that was the funniest thing I'd heard, because I was like, yeah, that was my name for a while.
Yeah.
You ride by on a skateboard. It wasn't, hey, cool dude on a skateboard.
Okay, I think we could save the word. We could say the word because we were victimized by the word. You know, we're not trying to victimize anybody. That was the deal. Like,
that frees up a lot of stories I'd like to tell where it's really funny and it is being used to victimize someone who's telling me the story, so it's not like amplifying it, but it's like, God damn, that's funny.
So once upon a time, the worst thing you could be, like these guys would drive by and they'd just call you a faggot for no reason. Yeah. Or they would call you a freak. That was the other one, you fucking freak. Yeah. And that gave them carte blanche to just like harass or attack or to chase or to
This is after anally hazing someone at the hockey rink.
At the hockey rink in the showers. Yeah. It's like, oh, those guys are good.
What a bunch of gays out here.
It's strange.
On your gay boards.
My brother was a hockey guy for a long time. And, you know, he got out of the pro, or not, he was kind of like moving into like getting a little older, 13, 14, you know. And,
sure, but starts getting really serious.
They start grabbing each other's cocks in the fucking...
Okay, whoopsie daisy. That wasn't where I thought you were going to go. I'm like, yeah, it starts getting tough, then you got more tryouts, things more competitive, guys got to like train you around. No, grabbing dicks.
Yeah, they started like dick touching and stuff, and Graham's like, it got really weird in the locker room, and that's just the bro down environment. Sure. But those guys are like the most staunchly, you know, aggressively anti-gay dudes. So absolutely. Such a weird, I guess, dichotomy.
It was like, I'm going to show you how gay you are.
Yeah, this is what we do.
Pull your pants down, spank your ass in front of everybody.
Yeah, all that.
Yeah. No, that was my fucking high school, man. That was we went through that, and it was funny because I don't remember it like being a real big thing before. I was in like grade 7, 8, 9. That's when like our high school, because I'm from a small town. That's when you got with the high school kids. But there was guys who were a few years older than us that was like the big thing. You're always pantsing somebody. You're always spanking somebody. You're always pretending to dry hump some other dude from your class because it was the funniest. Well, then you're Eiffel Towering some dude in the hallway because that's hilarious. And then it just carries on. And all of a sudden you're like 5 years in and you're like, is this just our culture now? Like, is this what we do? It's like every time we meet each other, we gotta slap each other in the dick. Somebody's gonna get bent over, and it's like, why though? We keep doing that. Like, is this just the weirdest running gag, or are we like fucking legitimately like just all into this now at this point? You know what I mean? Yeah, you're like just going, oh, somebody's gonna spank my ass today. I know it.
When does playing gay chicken end up just being gay? You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna kiss you, kiss you back.
Get into it, fellas.
Touch it. Oh, you can touch it, right?
Ride the lightning.
Yeah. Well, that's the other.
Actually, one of the funniest ones I can remember was a kid in my class. Everybody used to wear those snap pants. You know, you remember them shits that snaps all the way down the legs,
Yeah.
and after you use them like even a handful of times, the snaps would wear out. They were really flimsy. Well, that was like the funnest game. Is like you see somebody wearing those, like okay, what 45 minutes they're gonna have before somebody fucking yanks them while they're going to the gym or whatever. Well, I remember the one time Buddy got his yanked, and okay, I'm just gonna preface this also by saying it wasn't just like, well, this guy's a nerd, we're gonna pick on him. I'm like, all the cool kids got it. You know what I mean? I remember this kid specifically, he was one of the cool kids, and he got it from one of the older guys. He yanked his pants off and then threw him up around the basketball net. So he's in the gym trying to jump for them, and I remember just thinking like, yeah, that's one of the funniest and fucking rudest things I've ever seen all at the same time.
Now that shit nowadays would
Oh,
get a
you'd
kid
go to jail.
expelled from school,
You'd go to jail.
or charged
For
I'd
sure.
say.
Yeah, like you'd be in juvie, you'd be in some sort of treatment program.
Some treatment.
I'm for sure, and I mean, I'm not saying that's not right. Also, because at the time we were all still being dry humped and having our pants yanked off.
Yeah,
you know what I
right,
mean?
right.
So, fucking maybe there should have been some intervention, I guess. Anyways, what the fuck are we talking about? Your kid going back to school, right?
Yeah, my kid's
You're
going back
concerned
to
over
school.
COVID,
Well, and
right?
that's just
Yeah.
it. Like, we're off on our ADD. But squirrels. So yeah, she's going back to school. I'm kind of worried about classrooms with everybody kind of packed in there, and I've seen some where the teachers have separated the desks with like plexiglass. But what kind of environment is that? You know, they can do a lot of this stuff online and just let the kids learn from home. But I'm worried. I'm waiting to see. I bought her a fancy mask that she likes to wear, so that's at
Lean
least a
into
start.
it.
Yeah,
Lean
exactly.
into it. That's a tough balance, because I mean, I understand like there's one side is definitely going like, these kids have to go back to regular, because a kid irregular for 6 months, that could be like an adult's like 6 years. You know what I
that's a
mean?
good
Because it's so relative, right? You know, for how they're learning. When you're 12, like 6 months is a big fucking deal, and it could really change the path of how you go or how you socialize. You know, depending on what age you are. And so there's definitely arguments to be made for that. But then again, there's still ways to do that within, especially the groups that they've allowed now, like where it's family groups that you can consistently commingle with. So I mean, if you got cousins and shit like that, like I mean, there's a way to still have that integration in with a bunch of other people that are even similar to your age or a little bit off, so you can still kind of learn stuff like you get at school. It's just not as broad, obviously, but it'd be more like going to school in a small town then. You know what I mean? Is what it'd be more like, because there's like lots of places back around where I grew up. Like you'd have one hand, you'd name all the grads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying every year, but some years that was the case. And so it would just be more like that experience, I think, where it's like you can still have these interactions, and they'll still, I mean, as shit opens up again, and maybe schools are even the last thing, but if sporting events are fucking whatever else, more interactions happen. Because I think that's the big thing people are worried about, is like socializing their kids and missing out on that. Because everything else, really, you can still do outside of a school setting, as far as if it's just like the gaining of the knowledge you need to have for that year period. That's what I'm saying. That shit you can absolutely translate and figure out how to do virtually or through some fucking Zoom or whatever. I
hope so. But this is an interesting thing. I think, yeah, for sure, you could do Zoom if you can afford the tools to have Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you talk about like some of the schools down in the hood. Some of those kids, they don't even have computers at home. They don't have any cell phones.
For sure.
So like, what's going to happen with them? And you know, there was somebody raised a very important point that happened with COVID, is that all of a sudden these kids. Sometimes some of those kids, school is their safe zone.
Yeah,
this is where they actually get food. This is where they actually get somebody talking to them, taking care of them, looking out for their best interests. Now you take 4 months where that kid is now in a toxic environment at home, and they don't have that little window where they're guaranteed a lunch, they're guaranteed a breakfast, or any of that stuff.
Well, and that's a core problem that. Even school is just a stopgate measure. Like that's not a permanent fix. Making sure that like that the teacher who has 35 or 45 kids to be responsible for during each class can keep an eye out to make sure everybody's still engaging properly, and you can tell whether or not that's a new bruise on their upper arm or not. You know, like that's already a fucking huge load that should have social workers in doing that. You know, I think
a lot of
so. Then
schools-
maybe that's the transition, right? Because I mean, if they're not all going to the same brick and mortar anymore, well, then all of a sudden those costs are less, you know what I mean? Even if you still have to maintain it because you think you're going to go back to it or whatever. So some of that cost that goes into schooling that was involved with having them being transported, all that kind of shit, maybe that can be reallocated, you know, to make sure if you already don't have what you need to make this happen, we figure out how to get you that. And we also
that's going to have to be
incorporating
replaced with social workers
Yep.
going to these people's
Totally.
homes.
That's what I'm saying,
And
right?
I think that's a big issue already in a lot of, at least the core neighborhoods, where it's like, hey, you come into our homes causes at least as much issues as you're solving, right?
No, but in the way it's been done in the past, right? Because nobody has a social worker show up at their house if there's never been a problem and no one's ever reported it. And it's like, no, this is just part of the system we do. Like if you're in grade 9, this is how many times we stop by and just check and see how things are going home. See what we can do to help it. You know, that doesn't happen.
That would be a
It's
nice situation.
That's what would be beautiful, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that doesn't happen. What happens is when there's a negativity attached to it, right? That's most everybody's experience with it, right? So it's hard to get past that. But if there was some way to make it be a more positive experience and make it a proactive thing instead of a reactive thing, I think that is a switch that would probably really fit. You know what I mean? Like, again, that's kind of like the small town thing. You'd have teachers that go out to all this. You wouldn't bring everybody to them, right? You'd be the new school marm in town. You know,
Well, it's a possibility. You know, and
it's
that's
more of a-
just it.
yeah,
I
little
saw this-
community.
I saw this one discussion with a bunch of like indigenous people, and it had to do with like there's a lawyer and like a prof from Toronto, like a lot of like professional like people that are working with the treaty rights and like that kind of stuff. And the one lady, I forget, she might have been a prof at like Indigenous Studies at the U of T or something like that. She mentioned that she still to this day hanging out with her kids has this implicit fear. I keep using the word implicit. I noticed that on the last one. But either way, has this ingrained subconscious fear anytime she sees her kids falling asleep on the couch, or if they have cousins over and they're all like passed out in the living room watching movies. She has this fear that just grabs her on a core level that you guys need to go to your beds, you need to sleep in your beds, because if an Indian agent or a child welfare worker comes, they're taking you away from me.
Right.
And she's grown up with that fear that like a social worker will come and take away her children just for being kids.
And that's again, that's almost 100% of interactions with social workers have
Traditionally,
negativity attached to
exactly,
it.
yeah.
No one proactively goes to a social worker. My things are going well. I have this thing upcoming and I may need help. I have a situation in the future that I might not be able to handle. That doesn't happen in this system.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you can try and do the right thing, but in more often than not, it's either something that you're so deep ingrained into, like worrying about whether or not they're sleeping on the floor, because that was always never an option before. That you had to, right?
You could
So
get taken away from mom.
That's
if you sleep on the
hardwired
floor.
into you,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, getting that kind of shit, and again, she'll have that till she's dead. She'll
Well-
she'll never not have that, because it was so ingrained into her
Yeah,
when she
it's
was a
ingrained
kid,
in-
and then she's put it into her next generation. Even if she never vocalizes it to them and says, "Oh, guys, you have to do that." If she just works through it, though, it might not get to them, I guess, but she's still gonna have it.
Whether or not it's actual trauma or just an ingrained like expectation. I keep using the word trauma, right? Like, but that can just be like an
when you
ingrained.
use it, I feel like it's very broad.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
It's not like in what traditionally people would necessarily consider like violent
Like,
trauma,
boom, like a sudden shock. No,
or
it's-
mentally or emotionally, right?
yeah.
It can be very. It can be falling off your bike as a trauma.
Yeah, well,
right?
yeah,
You get
a
gunshot
minor
from
or
that.
major,
Yes,
but
right.
like when with something like that, that's like an ingrained, repeated experience. And I guess you get taken away from your parents, even if it's just for a week, till they figure out what's going on. Some nice social worker comes. You're in a foster home till we figure out beds for you all. That's all it takes for
it's a
that
fucking
kid to be
nightmare.
like, "Who are you people?"
It's
right?
a nightmare.
Like, what are they talking about? They've lost thousands of children down in the States, the migrant children,
Yeah.
separating them from their families.
Yeah.
I have no clue why they felt the need to separate children from their parents. And now
Well, I
they've...
do.
Oh, you think?
I do.
Well,
Because they think it's a deterrent. Because they think if they show how tough they're going to be at the border, you come here, we're taking your kids away, that no one else is going to come. Thing is, first off, most people coming up there probably don't even speak the language that you're screaming at them at, and they're just going, I don't know. I'm running from gang violence in the country. I'm running from an oppressive regime that was killing my family. I've got 2 little kids with me, and I just crawled across a fucking river. You know
We've
what I
got
mean?
cousins up here that have a restaurant.
No,
or,
it's
a
gross, but
business.
that's their logic. They think it's a deterrent to do that. Plus, it really shows any of the other ones around here how strong they are too.
Yeah,
because look
man,
what we can do, and it's profitable, because I don't want to get too conspiratorial on this fucking thing. But pedophile rings are fed somewhere. They got to get their fucking
Okay.
children somewhere.
Well,
and when you're moving vans of just school-age children and they're only girls around in New York City in unmarked fucking vans in the middle of the night, which this current government has been caught doing, and people going, "Hey, where are these kids going to? Where are they from?" And no one's answering. No one's got badges on. That doesn't seem like a very fucking in the sunlight kind of system to me.
There's a lot of weird, sketchy lack of transparency going on with this. Across the board with the
Yup.
United States political system, there's a lack of transparency. Like that, we don't tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
Now I'm on social media enough, and I see a lot of the child trafficking, pedophile ring conspiracy going on, and it frustrates me, because I think the amount these people just throw shit at the fan, hoping some sticks, it's going to detract from the real issues at hand.
There's still thousands of children that just go missing every year.
Well-
thousands of women that go missing every year. You're like, who goes fucking missing? Who disappears without a physical trace whatsoever? Who do you know that ever just like, you know what, fucking Aunt Lee You know, one day she was just gone. She just left, and you know what? We never worried about it. We always knew she was fine. She went off, and we knew she was doing her own thing. They're stolen. Someone's murdered them, or they're stolen. That's it. People don't disappear, especially people that are already in the fucking system, doing things, going to school, having jobs. Like,
so my aunt, before she passed away, one of my aunts before she passed away, she'd been through a lot of hard times. Like, she worked the street of Vancouver for a while and stuff, and she jumped out of a moving vehicle being driven by Robert Pickton one time, trying to get her to go to party at his farm. And for those people that aren't familiar with Robert Pickton, he was a serial killer in British Columbia. He preyed predominantly on the East Hastings area, and he picked up predominantly native women and murdered them and fed them to his pigs. It was a pig farm, and they don't even know. I think it was like 40 or 50 women for sure that he did this to. But that's part of the MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women in Canada, is that the police kind of don't pay much attention to another Indigenous lady, another Indigenous prostitute, another Indigenous woman who happens to be a drug user on the street that goes missing. They just assume, oh, whatever, they went to Calgary, it's not our problem anymore, or they went off to, you know, Edmonton, or they took off to Victoria, or went down south. So,
and is that common?
Well, I think it may be.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how much migration within a country there is.
Oh, I thought you meant the serial killers.
I believe it actually is quite common, honestly. Well, but I don't know how much migration there is, because maybe I don't see it. You know what I mean? Because we're far enough north that it's pretty inhospitable for most of the year, and even Regina's bad, but at least it's along the Trans-Canada. So maybe through there you see people that do sometimes make that migration seasonally if they can save up enough money or whatever.
They can save.
But
why would you leave
that seems like a stretch. Well, that's what I'm saying. Why would you leave BC?
Yeah, why would you leave a temperate climate to go somewhere colder?
Come to fucking Regina.
You're not going to get across the border into Washington. Yeah, you're not going to go north up towards Alaska. You're not going to go anywhere like that.
If you've got the upstart and the means to figure out how to sneak across the fucking border through the bush, or you're going to camp out for a couple days and walk to this other place, you're not homeless.
And
you know what I mean?
Probably not preoccupied with getting high or turning tricks to get
That's what I'm saying. Like, you don't have the problems then that keep you tied to there. That's what's keeping these people there, and then making them victims, right? Because and I totally understand the side that's going to say, well, I mean, the resources are stretched very thin. There's only so many officers to look at this and all that kind of shit, and that's true. But then in the case that's a bigger systemic problem, that you don't have enough people, that you have so many missing, you don't have enough to look for them. That's never been a problem. We ever seen a movie where, like, we need a posse together to go find this missing kid? They're like, no, we got 90 missing kids. We got 30 people for a posse. Are we going to be able to fucking find them all?
See, and that's just it. So I believe in a large way, okay, there's a few elements that are going on with I think, the missing kids, where I think that, well, first off, I think the numbers of missing kids are largely exaggerated. I think the vast majority of accounts of missing children are family that are reported as being missing, that hit into the statistics. Oh, we got a missing kid report because dad took without permission or mom took without permission. So there's a good chunk you could take that away. And then I'm pretty sure that a lot of those that do, get assaulted are from family members. There's a good chunk that are family members.
It's almost exclusively like family members and people of authority, coaches, clergy.
So I'm really worried right now with the conspiracy of human trafficking and child trafficking, in that it's being exploded. Like, these busloads of kids are being.
Well, no, but just think about the numbers.
Okay. So I think this carries over from that old 1980s satanic panic, where the satanic cults are out there. There was if you look it up, the Martinsville police scandal. There was a big thing in '93, I think it was, where these children were molested in this daycare, and they were led through their testimony to say that there was this big conspiracy to do it, right? And the trial found out that yes, sketchy stuff did happen in the daycare, but it was the daycare people's son that was largely responsible, and he assaulted a few of the kids. But all of a sudden it got turned into this huge conspiracy, much grander than the real deal. And that was like one of the little sparks that lit the tinder of the satanic panic in the 80s, where all of a sudden, if you listen to the mainstream media, under every single rock, you're going to find a satanic cult that's molesting children and committing human and animal sacrifices, when they just weren't there. It wasn't a real thing. And it was a panic that really kept people in fear and kept people looking around the corner. Yeah. And I think that's been carried over to the point where, like, nowadays, and that's a tried and tested old school way of othering somebody. We have to watch out for the kids. They're after your children. Those brown guys, they're pedophiles,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you're afraid
who's the weakest in your area, and that's who you say they're going to exploit or attack.
If they're after your kids, it doesn't matter if it's an invading army or immigrants or the strange guy down the street, the gay guy who's living alone. He must be a monster. We need to get him. And it's the easiest way for that whole traditional family values to create an enemy regardless of whether there is one. Now, I'm not saying that Epstein wasn't a fucking creep. I think there's absolute proof that there's Epstein and his homies were creeps. But I don't necessarily think that, like, Wayfair is shipping children across the...
Okay, so that's the thing with all of this, right? Every one of these crazy conspiracy things, there's always a small kernel of truth to it somewhere, right? That there is somebody somewhere who's peddling children.
Yes.
It's not through Wayfair, through these fucking cabinets, but that's my thing on this is, it's a numbers thing again, right? So when somebody says, well, no, they've got this pedophile ring and they had a van full of kids, okay, possibly. Because what's a van load of kids? Is that 30 kids? Is that 15 kids? And when we're talking like tens of thousands go missing every year, even if it's only 2% of that,
let's
or
say
5%
like tens of
that,
thousands go missing. Let's say
90% of them are explainable.
Yeah,
you know
500 or 1,000 is still too many.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm just saying, right? Then it does get to be you still have these numbers where you're like, well, no, that still doesn't account even at 2 or 5% for these children. Where it's like, no, somebody they didn't know didn't take them. They didn't just run away. They didn't die. They're like, no, there was a reason these children were taken, right? So then. It just gets to be that because then that's also how you dilute it when you're trying to hide that side of the argument, right? Is they do crazy shit like that. Where they say, well, Wayfair's doing it. And you go, well, they look into it. No. Well, it can't be as valid then. And then people pull back a little bit, right? Because somebody's showing them this ridiculous thing. It's like reporting assault, right? Mm-hmm. You know, there could be 50 credible ones, but when there's one not credible one, well, then a lot that skewers it for everybody else. And they go, well, but there was that one. And they can always point to that. So it throws a little mud on it. And that's kind of the thing with that. That's like the leaning into it. If you're a real piece of shit, right? You've been out there murdering prostitutes. You might even go and write a book about it, or start saying that there is someone else doing it, but it's on a much bigger scale, and it's this whole conspiracy, and it's lizard people. And then they go, oh, this is the guy talking about that. Well, he's already kind of tied up in this. We get it, but it's not him. He's not the fucking guy. So I've got this other
idea where, well, it's very similar. It's that throwing the mud on it, where there might be a real story here. A couple real stories here. Like you got Epstein, real story. Yeah. But then all of a sudden somebody with the means decides to start dumping mud on it. And don't you know it's the lizard people?
And why do they do
it
that?
Discredits the entire truth. And the real stories get washed away with the conspiracy because it's an intentional thing. Yep. And it doesn't matter. Okay, so you find out that the government's been, profiting from the same guys that are importing cocaine to America, and then they're taking weapons to Nicaragua, and it's all approved and funded by the CIA.
Oliver North signing off on everything.
Right, and that's legitimate news, but then all of a sudden the conspiracy is, but don't you know they're all in cahoots with the alien conspiracy, and all of a sudden it gets just washed away with everything else.
David Icke syndrome like you're talking about, right?
So if you talk about the legitimate shit that's going on, Jeffrey Epstein, if you talk about the legitimate shit that's going on, Nicaragua and the cocaine and all of that and Ollie North, and then people are like, oh, you're one of those tinfoil hat guys, huh? Because I've seen all about you, right? Yeah. And so now I think with the child trafficking and like the legitimate rich fucks.
I see. Yeah. No, it's definitely blowing up right now.
Like the shit with Wayfair. Come on, guys. You give your head a shake. Who's really behind that creates this fucking, narrative that's saying, don't you know what's really going on? And then you get so inundated with the bullshit that you don't even pay attention to the real shit. And that's what's fucking with
and then people get disillusioned with it because it's hard for them sometimes to tell what is the real shit. This seemed like a credible source, but then again, it's almost like it's only you can only see those things if you want to reinforce it too, right? Like you want to believe that they're Wayfair selling kids in cabinets to even fucking believe that. You say that off the cuff to somebody and they go, "What the fuck are you talking about?" You got to kind of want to believe that, right? So even that kind of shit, it's there because somebody can look at it and go, oh, yeah, maybe I think that, click, like, fucking share.
And then there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way it is. But you know what you can do? You can go to your city hall and say, hey, I know that there's child prostitutes on 18th and whatever, and you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah. For sure. That's how you approach the real problem.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There's child prostitution happening in our own city, and all these people are online screaming about, these companies selling kids and like these grand conspiracies. That shit's happening in town, guys.
Right?
Go do something about it in your backyard.
Yeah, getting worked up about that.
Yeah, but it's easier to go click, click, click. Well, what about this? What about this? Like Saskatoon introduced the Adult Services Bylaw 9011, and I fought it because they shut down dancers. They lumped exotic dancers, bikini dancers, anybody doing erotic dance in with adult service. So you needed one license if you were a dancer or a model, the same as a prostitute. But I had to agree with the bylaws. There's a bunch I disagreed, but like one of them, you needed to be a resident of Canada. You needed to have a proof of age. You needed to have an address where you were living in Saskatoon, and you needed some money and a criminal record check. Nobody involved with the adult services could be underage, could have a record for, drugs or, extortion or anything like that, because they really wanted to say, This way we can put you away longer if we catch you trafficking kids.
Yeah, well, that's a vulnerable sector protection thing. Like if you work like Boys and Girls Club, that's the same kind of fucking hoops you got to
Yeah,
jump through.
jump
right?
through
To
some
protect the
background.
children.
Yeah, exactly. To
You know?
protect the children in a real way. But I think that there's this like the human trafficking.
Yeah.
Cool. What about the local teachers that get busted with like, terabyte full of child porn?
Yeah.
You
Add
know,
it to the pile though, man. That's what I'm
Right.
saying, right? Like, again, this is just a conversation happening thing at this point, right? Because, again, you and I, it's like talking about politics and what's going on. For a lot of people, this is raw and new to them. They haven't heard the conspiracies. They haven't seen that. And then they start hearing and they look into it and they go, what's this fucking child porno ring about, with the Epstein? And then they're down the rabbit hole that we've already seen a while back and already seen how it wasn't necessarily always truthful. But they're still processing that, right?
Well, and then they run into the grand conspiracies of hooded, like eyes wide shut cult things.
Sure.
And that I think is an exaggeration.
Yeah. Oh, sure. But that's what I'm saying. When you open your eyes to all those things in your media and your intake, whatever, you start to open your eyes to those things around you as well, right? Because then you start asking, well, geez, if that's happening there, can it happen in my community? And maybe you actually do look, and maybe you actually do ask, and then maybe you do get involved, right? Because again, if you're not part of the world and you're not familiar with it, you think it's either happening someplace else or not at all, and then it gets connected to you a little bit. Like I saw an example of this with Joe Rogan a little bit. He was talking to I can't remember the guy's name. He's I don't even want to say his name if I could remember it because I can't stand him. But anyways, they were having a discussion about Colin Kaepernick, and they were getting to at the beginning of why Kaepernick had originally starting to protest during the national anthem, and they come across this thing where he's saying like, I'd had guns pulled on me by police officers for no reason whatsoever. It was literally just because I was black, like I'm a famous athlete and shit, but they didn't recognize me, so right away that gun's drawn on me. And so then Joe Rogan is like, well, okay, I see why he got upset then, But it was like, well, no, he didn't need that. That was the catalyst maybe that made him finally take a stand. But like that was a person who could always empathize and understand what that was. But it was like, and I mean, not to speak ill of Joe Rogan anyway, I think he's great. But I think that he kind of looked at it like, if it didn't have a personal attachment to you, why would you get upset about it, right? Because I'm sure that's how he thinks. That's how many of us operate. If it doesn't have
That's a
personal
lack of
attachment,
empathy.
well, but it's kind of ingrained into us too, because that's how you prosper in this society. You don't be empathetic. You figure out how it's going to apply to you and how you can benefit.
The society rewards
exactly,
sociopaths.
exactly. And if it doesn't connect with you, then why would you take any steps? It's like I get in this discussion sometimes when I talk about voting and how frequently I will vote not necessarily for my personal best interest, like financially, if I know that my vote is going to go towards something that there's a group that needs that more than I do, whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to explain to people sometimes because like, well, why though? They're going to get it anyways, and they're going to this and they're going to that. And like, well, because that's how I want to live. I don't want to be someone who takes more than they give if I can, and that's one way I can do it, by empathizing with other people.
I find it very interesting with the movement towards social justice, the movement towards political activism, when a lot of the activists are only involved with their own causes that will benefit them.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I mean, but to be
and
fair
then
though,
somebody who's out there and he's like, or they're like, I'm protesting for the benefit of the people that aren't like me.
Yeah.
They're like, but you're the oppressor. You're not an ally because you're whatever,
Sure.
let's hypothetically say a white heterosexual male.
Yeah.
Hypothetically.
But
And-
I just look at it. I just feel like that is like, that's totally a valid point, and that is definitely probably the attitude of some people. But that would be like it's like your weekend warriors in the kink community. You know what I mean? It's like the people that come in, got a taste, they want to see it. I think people that are that they commit themselves to this, they understand that there is other things that need attention other than what their thing is. But this is where
my thing is important.
Well, no, but this is where they can put their energy, right?
Well-
This dancer rights. There's lots of things in Saskatoon you could have gone down to City Hall for, but this was the thing that was in your field of view and that could take your energy. And you didn't have, I'm sure, a bunch of extra energy to put in fighting all the other things. This was the thing that you could do, right?
Well, you choose your battles.
Absolutely, right?
But
and if it's
it's
for a
very
greater good, it
interesting.
can come from a almost selfish area if it is for the greater good, and there's no harm in that, right? But
I
that's
don't
also
know.
how we
I don't
determine
know.
it, because
on one side we're saying your selfishness is a problem, but the other side, your selfishness is righteous. If somebody says, I want somebody's phone.
that's mine making noise.
Oh, okay. If somebody says, I want social justice for me, versus, hey, I want social justice for everybody else.
Okay.
I've had enough privilege.
Yeah.
Everybody else deserves some privilege.
Yeah.
And then somebody over here is like, no, I want my fucking rights. I want my self-respect. I want my voice to be heard.
Okay.
I don't care about these people over here who aren't being heard. I don't care about these people over here that aren't being heard, or these people. Mine is important.
Yeah.
My personal cause is important. It frustrates me. It frustrates me because especially when
Well, like, obviously, those people are narrow-minded. Obviously,
well,
right?
yes,
But you can
but it's
only
very
pick that.
common. It's very common.
I agree, but so is driving like a dickhead. I seen it all over the place city this afternoon. You know, but it doesn't mean everybody's out there killing people with their cars intentionally. If you get my point here, this is what I'm saying, right? It's not. By pushing my thing doesn't necessarily mean that I want to denigrate yours. But if I'm not conscious and careful of how I do it, that's what it's going to look like. And for two of those examples you're talking about, especially the social justice warrior angle, if the end result is that it is more equality for the all, even though you want it for yourself and you want it for the group, if the end result comes to what everybody ultimately did want, even though you did it with this intention and that one, if you didn't hurt anybody while you're doing it, it's just words and thoughts, man, and you still got to the same place. So that's kind of okay. And especially if it gets you to the same place as other people where you have conversations and engagement, and then maybe those start to shift. You start to change your perspective, and then it comes more towards a balanced one instead of such an extremist one, even if it is, I'm carrying to the extreme.
Well, I tend to respect the people that are willing to give up something of their own so somebody else can have it, as opposed to the people that are just sitting in a very privileged society screaming that I don't have enough. Yeah. Especially when you're in a privileged society, you know, like you have hot running water, you got a good paying job, you're protected by human resources, you've got all the food in your fridge you need, you've got your Shih Tzu, you've got everything you need in your world, but you're screaming that you don't have enough because somebody said a word that hurt your feelings. Like, that is not real oppression, and it really fucking frustrates me. And I'm willing to give up.
You know what the problem with that is, though, is that those people just have never had that perspective, right? Because if you're intelligent and you analyze your perspective throughout life, you can't possibly see that after having those experiences. After you've actually lived with someone or seen someone live without water and heat and all that kind of shit you're just talking about, right? And then you can't possibly complain about it afterwards if you're right thinking, right? If you're right-minded. If you're a narcissist, if you're a sociopath, that shit ain't gonna change.
Well, and that's just it. And this also allows the narcissists and the sociopathic narcissists to use social justice as their personal little like flag to wave.
For sure.
And like, if you say anything against me, you're a fucking oppressive influence. Now, me, I like 13 years ago, maybe right when my daughter was born, I went to the Philippines for some martial arts stuff. And I was in Manila, downtown Manila, and I had jet lag, so I'm walking around at 4:30 in the morning. And everybody else in Manila is generally asleep, but it's kind of a bustling city. I think they got like 30 million people in one city. Yeah, it's lots. And I'm walking by a burned out, like destroyed building, and I see a child. I couldn't even tell their gender. Like, skinny.
They're not just that young.
Yeah. Just tiny, skinny, probably wearing like ratty shorts, maybe sandals, maybe bare feet, dreaded hair in the rubble, sitting there, just like a scared animal. And there's zero social safety net. There's no hot running water. There's nowhere for them to go for food. Maybe they could get recruited into a begging gang where somebody will chop their hand off and say, "Oh, here, please give me money. I'm amputated," you know. And then they bring the money back to the guy that runs the gang. This shit happens, but you've never seen it. So your oppression is super important. Their oppression doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Interaction. You know what I mean? Like change of perspective.
It's
all that
fucking
shit
privilege
changes.
and insulation that you feel that you're being oppressed.
And even so let's follow that a little bit too. Like the privilege. Like even many people travel every year. But you went to a place where you were face to face and asshole deep in this kind of poverty. Maybe you'd never even seen before.
Oh no!
But a lot of times they'll use their travel dollars to. Oh, I mean, and I'm not saying it's dissimilar from some of the northern communities I've been to. Honestly,
yeah, exactly. Reserves in Canada are the same thing. And don't get me wrong. Like if I make good money in a year, I will take a trip to Mexico.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay, that's where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Because other people have that ability as well. But it might just be go to a place where I can be comfortable and have fun and have no
get away from my care.
Exactly, and then not see what is the issues of them around them, right? And not that, why the fuck would you want to do that on vacation first off? Why would you want to go and see the trials and tribulations?
See how much everybody else suffers.
Exactly, but that's not the point. If you're in and existing with people in the way they are, instead of just staying on the resort or just staying in the area that's just for the locals, you get out and exist with people, well, then you just see that because that's where it is, right? So even if that's not your intention to go out and take in all the poverty, but by trying to be part of where you are, that does that. And that, I was just thinking, because it kind of tied back what we were talking about last week with like how you live in an area. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the thing I'm talking about, right? Like I even thought about it a little bit more with you were talking about being segregationist a little bit, how there was some benefit to it. No, but honestly, I started coming around to your side a little bit. No, I started coming around to your side a little bit because if it's a world where you can travel freely from one area where you live as A and one area where you live as B, and there's no issue between going between the two, as long as when you come from this one from B back to A, you live as we do here. You don't bring
You
you don't bring these things. This is what we do here. Then when you want to do that, you can freely go back there. You know.
Yeah, my issue with that is if somebody's saying you can't leave.
Yeah,
or
that's
you're
what I'm saying,
not
right? So when
allowed
it starts to
come in.
become oppressive, right? When it's no, we're gonna decide who gets to come in and out, or you're not up. It's like, no, as long as you do the things that we're doing here, this is fine, right? And that's what we do. And it could even be an integration of those things between the two, whatever it is that the fucking broader group has agreed on for the area, right? It's all about getting along and going along to get along, right?
So I carry that model to an interpersonal micro level where you can be you.
Yeah.
You can have your beliefs. You can look how you look. You can live how you live. I can do me. You can drink beer. I don't need to drink beer. We can coexist peacefully because I respect your right for you to do you and have your beliefs. You can respect me for mine. You don't have to be mine. My imperialist attitudes on veganism or sobriety or drug-free lifestyle don't have to be trying to take you over. And you saying, hey, fucking lighten up, try some of this, doesn't have to take mine over. We can, right? We can have our little bubbles.
Exactly, but understand what those are, right? There's and yes, I totally agree. There's a difference between, if you want to try this, lighten up, and you're like, no, I really know it's not for me. Okay, cool. That's the end of that, right? But when people continue past that, then that's where it starts to become conflict. And
when
then
you start trying to push it, that's very imperialist. Or if I'm trying to push me onto you, that's imperialist. And
well, but it's funny though, because again, like you said, I can't remember you keep saying it, but it's like how equality looks like oppression to those who've never been oppressed, right?
Yeah.
That's when you practice what you want to do, even though it has no fucking issue with the autonomy of the other person, and they get upset. Oh, that's against me. Like again, you see that people saying that with masks now. Like seeing you wear a mask is offensive to them. Because it's like, well, no, it's like you're making me analyze why I'm doing this, like, and that's fucking crazy. You should be analyzing why you're doing that.
I saw this meme and I like it a lot. And it's like, if somebody says my religion doesn't allow me to do that thing, you could say that's cool. But if they say my religion doesn't allow you to do that thing, then we're going to have a problem.
Right.
Because that's a whole, you do whatever you want with your belief system. As long as you're harming none, that's your little world, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's the core of like all of them, by the way.
Yeah.
There's not one of them, unless it's some sort of death cult, I guess, that starts out with first off, you're going to want to divide and conquer. You're going to want to take over.
Well, there's a lot of people right now that are trying to intentionally get right-wing Christianity in place in the U.S., specifically in the U.S. political system, where like Trump's whole deal with freedom of religion is freedom of Christian faiths to be pushing, I don't support gay marriage, or I don't support, this, and I don't support that, and I'm going to shut you down.
It's the freedom to oppress and to take away rights of other groups that don't align themselves with
Remove pluralism. That's not religion. It's like freedom of Christianity. You know what I mean? To oppress Muslim, to oppress like
to be the
secular
law of the land.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not.
And that's what supposedly everyone who thinks forwardly in the Western Hemisphere is against in every Middle Eastern country that has every one of their laws dictated by an imaginary book.
Yes. Well, and you've got these like
Rather the
right-wing
book itself is
Christians.
imaginary, but the story is.
Well, yeah, like I've got a couple of them.
They exist. I've seen them.
Well, you've got these like right-wing Christians that are going off about Sharia law, and the Muslims are going to bring their value system and their way of living over here, and they're going to try and push it on us, and we don't want that lifestyle. And then they will give you a list of things that you will do wrong in your life that they want to put into the law that you are no longer allowed to do. You can't have an abortion. You can't buy birth control. You can't get married if you're gay. You can't like there's no shortage of it. You can't buy pornography. You can't like
pick a thing you can't do. It's because of Puritan Christian values.
So you got Puritan Christian values that they want to push into law, while at the same time they're like, we don't want the Muslim value system over here. You're all pushing a religious law. You guys
kept weed illegal for as long as they possibly fucking could, still kicking and screaming about it. Hey, just a plant.
Yeah,
on your own fucking terms. That's an issue.
Or mushrooms or any of that stuff. You've got a flag, you got a rifle, and you got a holy book. Which one are they? You know what I mean?
I've seen the meme.
Yeah, exactly. The Quran, the black banner, and like.
Although to be fair, ours was a guy
AK-47.
holding a hockey stick and a beaver by the tail while shotgunning a fucking can of maple syrup.
Yeah,
so,
right. I guess.
I mean, teach their own. Whatever.
Once again, I'm so
turns your crank,
happy I'm
as they
from
say.
Canada. I'm so happy I'm from Canada.
Well, I got family down in the States. I love you guys very much, and
worry about
I just
you.
hope you're doing well. Yeah, I always do anyways, but for all sorts of different other reasons.
Well. I don't even know.
My mom's laughing hard right now at that.
Yeah.
I hope. She's like, you son of a bitch, you know how I drive.
We were talking about this at the shop the other day, where living in Saskatchewan, we're lucky as shit because we've got a very sparse population. We're able to open up, and the numbers haven't exploded of the COVID. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, there's been pockets. There's been
yeah.
pockets of heat.
Yeah.
So we haven't had a fucking wild brush fire yet.
I don't know anybody like from Alberta that's really under lockdown, Vancouver that's really under lockdown, or even in the States where things are really going off, where, you know, I worry about what's their life like. What is their lockdown like? You know, I don't know. I don't know what it's like. You know, here we're lucky. I'm able to continue to make a living, to pay my mortgage, to get by, you know? So I don't know how it is for other people. I'm wishing people the best out there or whatever.
Well, I did see a thing today saying that it looked like 60% of restaurants that were shutting down probably weren't going to reopen. So, I mean,
really?
That's a lot of jobs that aren't fucking happening.
Yeah, and independent businesses. And where's the bailout in that? Where's it coming from? Is that in the States or in Canada?
I'm pretty sure that was a Canadian number, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
But
well, we do have
what
some
the fuck
sort of.
do I know? I barely read anything anyway.
We do have some social safety nets there, you know.
Yeah, no, we're working on it, but I think it was just because that's already an industry where, like, if you can make it, you don't make it till you made it 5 years, right? Being a restaurant, like, if you can do 6 months, okay, cool, see you in 16, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's already so fucking volatile. If you're not the flavor of the month anymore, if you're especially anything that is in any way specialized or highfalutin at all, tough to keep that fucking shit afloat. And a lot of times you're paying for prime real estate for a brick and mortar when you're running them ones.
That's a good point.
Whereas
That's a real good point.
fucking every old A&W could be in a box center, and I mean, I'm not saying the rent there's cheap, but it ain't the same as downtown.
Well, and that's a guaranteed formula. People recognize it. People
Tons
know
of
what they're
traffic.
getting.
Yep.
Yeah, they're
all
going
the time,
to
24
support
hours a day for some of them even.
as opposed to that high-end quality gourmet vegan kind of restaurant.
Then even if you frequently, maybe it's once or twice a week. Like I know some people like Amigos has got great fucking food, but I don't know anybody that eats here 5-6 days a week. Well, maybe I guess maybe there's a couple dudes who work next door. You know what I mean? You guys keep the lights on then for places like that, right?
Yeah,
you know, like especially any of the venues that kind of relied on music because they're still really it's slow getting back to that. Which
bands
again,
aren't touring.
It's and it's because and I've heard honestly that that there are some venues looking to book, and there've been some complaints that some places were like, well, we can only book to half capacity. Can we pay you half as much? So if you're a local Joe Blow band like myself. You know, that's
you
fine.
guys are looking to book it.
Yeah, okay, cool. We can show up. You know what I mean? It's not costing us a bunch of fuel to drive downtown or even to Regina or some other shit, right? But if you're trying to do a cross-country fucking thing or even a multi-province thing, yeah, you can't. It's really fucking hard to do. You either got to increase your price at the door or you got to figure something out because fuel still costs the fucking same whether there's 50 people or 500 people. And you got to figure that shit out. So that's going to be kind of a tough thing for them to balance out. And I mean, some of them are kind of leaning into doing home delivery for food if they've got a kitchen. And even if they're still selling bar food, they're like, well, wait, we can get it to you, and if you want to support that thing, then it's a nice way to do it, right? So,
well, I think a lot of people are going to have to revamp their model of employment, their model of operations. Like just like we're talking about schools, going to have to revamp how they're educating. I think even tattooing. You know, I went private. You know, I tattoo after hours. It's me and one client. We meet at the end of the day. We do tattoos into the evening. You go home after. I'm very rarely in that area with like 3 or 4 other people tattooing. There's other guys in there wear the masks and stuff like that, but I'm very rarely.
Well, that's even a pretty clean environment to begin.
Yeah,
with.
Nothing much has changed. We put masks on. Otherwise, our standards are
everything's
pretty
still
much
wiped down all the time.
Yeah,
and
we've got some.
You're smoking or coughing, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
if you've got.
I doesn't feel like that's the rule, right? You stink, you fucking whatever. You're not coming in.
Well, we just had a conversation at work that some of our guys are really leery about anybody with coming from out of province that wants to get tattooed. They're like, we don't know what your status is like. You could be lying. We know it's Saskatchewan.
We're all supposed to quarantine, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that's still the rule. If you've been out of country for sure, but I don't know how you get out now. The fucking border's still closed. But anyways, if you're getting out of here and coming back, from what I understand, you're still supposed to be quarantined.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the difference is if somebody comes in for a weekend and you have contact with them, right?
See, and that's just it. So somebody could be like, hot, traveling around, even
Well, you know what's interesting now that you've said that? I actually met a lot of nervous people this weekend because in my work I bang on a lot of doors and catch people off guard. And one dude was even like, "Oh, I thought you were maybe here to give me a citation or something." And I was like, "What the fuck for?" But then I started noticing where I was, how many out of province license plates I saw, and I was like, "Oh, maybe you guys aren't supposed to be out here doing what you're doing, and you're worried somebody you're me right now. Every time I hear bang on the door, I'm like, ah, fuck, hide everything." Yeah,
right.
Kick the fucking screen door out. I'm going at the back.
So yeah, that's part of the model. Like B and I, my partner, why we're actually going and trying to get our counseling and the hypnotherapy and like all of that stuff on the go, because this is an alternative hustle that we can do over like Zoom or over phone or over Skype.
Something you can do.
Yeah, we can give people a bit of counseling.
That's an adaptable motherfucker right there.
Well, we're trying to figure, because like what happens if all of a sudden something happens and I need to make a living, right? And there's going to be
darkness.
Well, there's going to be a lot of people with anxiety, a lot of people with stress that could use, either relaxation techniques, meditation techniques, or at least an ear for a half hour or an hour at a time. And
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Maybe that is a shift where that starts to, because again, you want to fill that gap with we need more mental health professionals and whatnot. Okay, maybe just somebody to talk to. Maybe you don't need to have a doctorate in something. You can do something where it's like, no, I can help people to this level. You got these big issues, you got stuff that we got to work past that's out of my realm. I mean, it'd be the same if you're a specialist in something, right? You'd send it to the guy who's fucking higher up the ladder. This is the best guy in the fucking state.
Well, I think I mentioned it on other podcasts or other episodes, but I know I talked to my therapist about it. The Australian Aborigines have a thing called sacred listening, where the elders would sit with the younger people, and the younger people would just like blah, tell them what was going on. And it was a sacred process where the older would just let them talk and give them a few cue words to continue to tell their story. And the more they told the story, the less they're holding on to this stuff and letting it fester inside. And that's, I think, the new model. Why can't we come up with a new model of, well, not necessarily counseling, but like coaching, supportive kind of like, I guess, like coaching, counseling, that's not attached to, 5 years of a post-secondary education.
I think when you have societal strains like a fucking pandemic, that's when shit like that changes. Stuff starts to have to adjust, and then we adjust in ways where you're like, okay, well, we don't have to keep doing 70% of this, but this 30% we changed, we should fucking keep. It really works. It's going to keep working for us, and we're going to figure out how to build on that.
Well, Matt,
I think times of struggle and strife, that's when you start to see, the adaptable adapt.
Well, if the elders and the medicine men can come out of the woodwork and teach people breathing exercises and ritual and ceremony, and like, this is how we smudge, this is why we smudge, this is the intention we put into this is how we meditate.
I'm going to do you one better, Pat. I guarantee there's somebody out there who's got videos on YouTube of them doing that, or they've got some sort of thing where they're doing it. Anybody who's interested in that shit, get on there and watch it and like it and learn it. And just, if you got fucking downtime, especially if you're not working and you're stressing out about it, this is the time to get into fucking shit that you're like, you know what, I've never just watched a whole documentary on this. I should fucking do that now.
The one thing I'd recommend people right off the bat is mindfulness meditation. Look up mindfulness meditation, because that's a start point on every other breathing technique. If you can just work on mindfulness, it's very simple, it's very present, and it's not complicated. It's not attached to any religion. That's it. And then if you're interested, at least because I'm from Saskatchewan, I was born in Saskatchewan, I think that First Nations like wisdom is very important because it's our land, right? And my one buddy, he's like, yeah, smudge. You can't overdose on smudging. It's a sacred thing. It's a simple thing. You take some cedar, some sweetgrass, some sage, and you do a smudge. And you can find that stuff on YouTube like crazy. And you know what? When you talk about smudging and you talk about sweat lodges and you talk about this stuff with Indigenous people, my experience, I can't say that what they all feel, but the people I've interacted with are like, wow, thanks for giving a shit about our people or our culture. I appreciate that. Sure. And that
they're not secretive of it in conversation.
No,
right? You
so
want to go to ceremony,
thing,
there's a little more secrecy, but in conversation, it's like,
well, thanks for giving a fuck.
Why not?
Because
right?
nobody here seems to give a fuck. And so finally, somebody's like, hey, man, what's that smudging all about? Holy shit, you want to come to a powwow sometime? And that makes a difference. And that, I think, is part of the reconciliation that we can do.
Well, that's putting your energy in something you want to see change in, right?
Yeah,
You start engaging with these things, those doors open.
Imagine that, more of that, instead of fighting racism. You know what I mean?
Like, instead of fighting racism, embracing,
building bridges towards different cultures.
You said that the one other time where you're like, I'm tired of all this, like, I'm anti-racist. Why can't we be like,
pro-friend, pro-culture, learning where you're from,
pro-individualism, pro-fucking whatever it is you want to have positive in your life.
And that's a good, like, you're talking about the USA. You talk about the USA.
It's hard though. Okay, sorry, just to say, because my knee jerk a lot of times is negativity, protection, right? I'm working through that, but again, that's kind of how we're programmed. That's how we were supposed to survive, by not being open, by being closed, by, like you were talking with me doing Cali, keeping your martial art hidden to your village because your head could get removed, right?
Oh yeah, we can get into that for a second.
We should. You know what? We don't have to do it today necessarily, even though I'm looking at all these nice little tools. Because I was talking to somebody about Cali a little bit this weekend, and I kind of got explaining a bunch of the philosophy that you explained to me about it, and even just of the martial art itself, and they were captivated by it. And I was like, oh fuck, I haven't talked about this in years. This is really exciting for me, and because it's a different type of martial art. Like you start at a different spot than most.
So Filipino martial arts, I did it for, I started probably 15, 16 years ago. I just started getting into it, probably 15 years ago. And Filipino martial arts, there's a few. Kali, Arnis, Eskrima are different names for the same art, and they're weapons arts, improvised weapons. They originated, for the people with the video, the Philippines weapons of the Moroland. These were arts that were generally practiced by the tribal people of, I think there's something like 7,100 islands in the archipelago of the Philippines. So little tiny pockets. Each little tribe would have a few different motions to use with different types of swords depending on the type of war that they were going to go into. And so these arts, when the Spanish conquistadors raided, were the conquistadors just shut it down. Where you people are slaves, you're workers, blah blah blah. You are no longer allowed to own weapons. You're no longer allowed to own swords. All you can own, or you can do plays that are called Moro Moro plays, which tell the story of the Spanish conquistadors conquering our land. So you could have sticks, and they would come up with these forms that were based off of sword fighting techniques, but they were plays. And so they hid training in martial arts under these patterns that were trained in the Moro Moro plays. And then they also used a lot of farming implements and whatever was around in order to just practice these plays and these dance moves that got formed into a very systematic martial art, you know. And there's a few,
and that's the modern version of it that came from that. It also, like, sorry, I don't want to jump in too hard, because it did incorporate some of the Spanish moves as well, because you're doing both sides of it.
Yes.
But then you're figuring out what works and what doesn't, and you're keeping a bit of the lunges and shit that maybe you never used.
Espada,
exactly.
Daga. So you've got sword and dagger. That's straight up Spanish.
Sorry, and where I was going with this is like you'd said before too, that previous to that, it's all these individual little islands, individual little tribes, all headhunting. You had to keep it as secret as you could already.
Well, you want to win. So you want to be safe.
So somebody else couldn't learn your secret little trick to not get your head cut off, and then you're going to win. So it was like, it was still keeping that secrecy, but we got together. We got to pool our fucking resources, figure out how to get this secret little dance that we do in front of these Spaniards so we can get them out of here. So I think that's like just an interesting transition, because like during a generation, probably it would have had to gone from like, we were raised to fucking, not only when we see these guys, we're cutting their fucking heads off, to all of a sudden like, okay, here's the real fucking enemy, guys. You know, like, sorry, cousin, I guess this is what we're doing now.
Well, Magellan, he arrived on, I forget which island. I think it was probably in Cebu or somewhere in the middle of the Philippines.
Come on, I want to poke you.
Yeah, well...
like, come on now!
Well, Magellan land and Lapu Lapu and his tribesmen took his head. Like, they fought off. Like, these guys with, like... swords and bolos, and they were able to fight off a lot of the conquistadors for a long time. And the 1911, the 45 ACP pistol was designed to fight off like Muslim and the Moro Filipinos who wouldn't go down when they were attacking with bolos and swords. They're like, these little guns we have aren't shutting these guys down enough. Jesus. We need a larger gun to shut these guys down. The Philippines are crazy. Like, I love the people, I love the culture, I love the history, and oh man, the spirituality of the healing arts and stuff like that. That stuff is super cool. I would never want to tangle with an angry little Filipino man. You know, they'll take it to that level, and you know,
like fighting a badger.
Oh Jesus!
Hey,
yeah,
which end to grab, and they're coming at you. Mm-hmm. Ball of fury.
Yes. So yeah, I did Filipino martial arts for a long time. I do kettlebells now. I do my yoga. I do my training. I don't teach martial arts, but I do have a website, nemesiscali.com, if anybody wants to check it out. I do private sometimes, but I had some bad luck. I trained a couple guys at, and again, the Filipino martial arts is a weapons art, so
that's where it starts.
Yes, and then you learn your empty hand after your weapons stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't build up to like every single other martial art. No. You don't get a sword until you fucking learn how to throw somebody or kick them or punch them. No, they're like, here's your knife.
This is going to keep you alive, and then we'll learn to fight after you know how to stay alive. You lose the knife,
or you lose the stick, or the rock, or the chunk of extension cord, or the
bite
chain,
headbutt, elbow.
You lose all those things. I'll show you how to punch and kick.
So we start with sticks, and then that stick is actually, you do it with a blade mentality. So if you're learning proper stick techniques, you're actually learning sword fighting, and if you learn your sword fighting, that applies to a shorter sword all the way down to a little knife. So you're technically learning knife fighting. Now I trained a couple guys, and I guess I didn't screen them or vet them enough, and there was a couple guys that poked people and cut people in bar fights, and that was a real karmic wake-up call for me, where I'm like, you know, I've got this,
using this for defense.
I've got this skill set, and you know what? And I got in a couple of street altercations, and like most of my go-to stuff that I trained to do for like the better part of 10 years, like, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. I'm going to go to jail if I do any of this stuff. So I can't do this with this guy ground and pounding me doing MMA stuff. Yeah, I can't like shove my thumb in his eye, bite his nose off. Well, I could, but you know, there's witnesses and I'm going to go to jail.
To be fair, if you've trained in it for fucking years, People are gonna absolutely say, well, no, you knew what you were fucking doing.
Yeah,
You just
you
poked the
didn't
guy in the
accidentally
eyeball.
shove
Yeah.
your thumb in his eye.
That was an eye removal.
Yeah, that was on purpose. So, it's like, whoops. What about these 200 videos that you have on YouTube? This is how to do it.
I was telling these people, I said, like, even some of the components of this, I said, you practice eye pokes, you practice head buns, you practice and talk about the psychology of biting to the face.
Yeah, there's Kinomutai, which is the art of clawing and biting in a subset of Kali.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that shit should be taught in fucking grade 8 while we're at it too.
Man,
Hey,
it's
all
so
you young ladies going down the hall for sex ed.
Yeah.
Here we're also doing this one round of Cali where we teach you how to claw and bite.
Yeah,
properly.
exactly. You grab a guy's face, you just tear anything, and you bite and shake your head. And if
Yeah.
it comes out, you do it again, and if it doesn't, you just shake.
Yeah.
That's you
Like a
bite to your
goddamn
teeth.
pit bull.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty nasty.
Well, and you were
stuff.
saying too, like the psychology of that is if somebody starts biting you, and specifically on the face,
Yeah.
that makes you feel like you're being eaten.
Okay.
And you got to do everything you can fucking do to get away. You don't want to attack. You don't want to rob. You don't want to do all the horrible things in the world.
Your
you want to do
boner's not
anymore.
persisting if you've got like a gaping wound.
You've got a fucking person biting your cheek off. You get the fuck out of there. Oh, I'm almost throwing up even thinking about it a little bit, honestly.
So there's
Makes me
this,
uncomfortable.
Custard.
yes.
Oh,
there's-
you son of a bitch.
We'll go there in a second. There's this instructor. His name's
Unreal.
Paul Vunak, and Paul Vunak trained under a guy named Dan Inosanto, who trained under Bruce Lee. And Dan Inosanto introduced the Filipino martial arts to Bruce Lee, like arts like the nunchaku and stuff like that, like the whatever they call it in the Filipino arts, I forget. But so Bruce Lee's nunchucks were taught to him by Dan Inosanto, who's a Filipino martial art. He trained a guy named Paul Vunak, and Paul Vunak is a maniac. This guy, he got really into the drug scene after he got quite good and would just walk around California and go into a drug den and just headbutt elbow people and fucking rob them. He would like clear out drug dealers and then like smoke all this crack and go do it again. Like that was how he did all the testing. Oh yeah, Paul Vunak was a maniac.
He's like having all this spiritual shit. I've learned all these fancy
So-so,
arts
right?
so I can beat the shit
Oh,
out of
man.
some druggies.
So then this guy, he got contracts training the Navy SEALs, and he's one of the guys who really got into like the hardcore Kino Muay, and he incorporated with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So you get into
Sorry, I just remembered one of his videos you showed me.
you get into
Sure you're gonna talk about this.
full guard, and you lock the guy down. You get one hand around him so he can't get up. You've got him in full guard, and then you start biting, and then you continue to bite because then he wants to get away, but you don't let him get away until his mind starts losing his shit because he wants to get away, and you just don't let him, and you're gnawing into his face.
Yeah.
That's Paul Vunak. If you want a real
It's a
fucking
fucking nightmare while we're at
can you
it.
imagine that, right?
Yep, I
So-
have.
Yeah,
Vividly.
it's horrible. So if you want to trip down the martial arts rabbit hole for one of the craziest lunatics, look up old Paul Vunak videos on YouTube. And
What you watching?
Holy
Paul Vunak
yeah,
videos.
Vunak. You know, he's a nutbag, and I love him.
So-
he still trains people. You can go to California and like hang out with him. He doesn't like to
Tell you how to bite faces, right?
talk about his cocaine days, but he makes jokes about it. He's like,
Yeah.
so he's like on his videos, he's like, I've heard rumors about you, Paul. What about the 80s when you were really involved in cocaine? He's like, I don't remember doing any of that. That's just it. He's
Christ.
like all serious.
Yeah.
Don't remember it.
Yeah.
Doesn't. He's not saying it never
playing
happened.
a role. He's
Yeah.
like, I could have been. Who knows? I did a lot when I was on cocaine. Wait, what were we talking about?
Yeah, exactly. What? Yeah.
Back in the 80s, was it? Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's fucking Rick James. Yeah, cocaine's a hell of a drug. I never did cocaine.
Yeah, cocaine's a hell of a
That's
drug.
fucking funny. No, what you watching? What you watching though? So we talked about this a little bit before. One of my least fucking favorite movies of all time is the movie Dead Alive, and it's a cheesy fucking horror movie from probably 1990 or something like that. Early
So
90s.
over the top.
Anyways, yeah, terrible fucking effects, shitty puppeteering of the.
I love the
infected
chainsaw
monkey.
strapped to the guy's front, and he
Chainsaw in the
runs
front,
into the
yeah,
monsters.
the fucking lawnmowers.
Oh, that's it. No, yeah, lawnmower, not chainsaw,
Yeah, no, it was. And see, I only recently saw the end of that movie because I did watch it once about. Let's see how old I am right now. Probably 23 or 4 years ago. And there's a scene in this fucking movie. It's not a spoiler, and I hope none of you watch it. But if you ever do watch it, be
It's
prepared
great.
for what
Watch
happened.
it. Do it.
There's this fucking scene in this movie where they're sitting around a table, and one of the people at the table is this infected kind of half fucking zombie. And as they're eating, this is gonna make me. I'm just about ready to fucking gag as is. Parts of them are kind of falling off into their food, right? You know, like they're dripping and whatever. And there's this custard that is served at the end of the meal, and it's creamy. It is thick. And she launches this absolute huge gob of pus and blood and just absolute nightmare from the arm into this guy's pudding or custard, and he just fucking eats it. It's one of the,
He's eating the custard like it's nothing, and there's this pussy blood
It makes
thing.
me physically fucking ill, Pat, to even like think about
It's
it.
so gross.
And I walk into fucking Russ's apartment at Halloween to come see what they're doing. There's a bunch of them sitting around. One guy I'd never met before. It's the first time I'd met Ryan. Hey, Ryan, if you're listening. And as soon as I see what movie they're watching, I go, oh man, there's this fucking scene in this movie that I can't stand. And I say it, and they go, yeah, it's next. Sure as fuck. That's what comes on. Absolutely projectile vomit instantly. As soon as I see it, I'm like, I'm old enough. I can sit through this now. You know, I can figure this out. No, just violently puke right beside all of them because they didn't have a door on their bathroom at the time, so there wasn't even like any sort of like barrier. Just me puking as hard as I fucking can. And I don't know why I brought that up because now I really feel very uncomfortable. I think of it every time I think of custard. Like I can't eat custard. Like if you tell me it's pudding, I'm cool. You tell me you're serving custard. Nope, I'm out.
It's got some strawberry swirl in there.
You piece of shit. I can't deal with that. Well, it makes me uncomfortable. So, and
I'm glad
what
we
you're
went
watching,
there.
don't bother watching
Don't
that.
watch Dead
Yeah,
Alive.
yeah.
There's another really good grimy horror movie like that called Slither. You ever watch that? It's like Aliens Land. They got all these like little wormy things. It's a pretty cool one. I like that one too. Slither.
That is ringing a
There's a few. We should get I got a couple buddies that are real horror buffs that we could get them down here and talk
that'd be
about
fun.
that
Little
stuff.
movie night.
Yeah,
movie
talk
night with
about
the
some of
fellas.
the grimiest movies. Like there's some movies. Oh my god, like what is it, Croatian film or something? Like there's a genre of horror which is like next level. It's almost bordering on snuff. Like they're usually European movies. Like there's what's that one? There's the Croatian film, there's Martyrs, there's a few others, and these movies are just ultra violent and raw and gritty, and I won't watch them. I've seen one or two in brief passing.
I couldn't do it. Even like the torture porn stuff. Like
Yes, that's
like,
basically it.
Like Hostel and shit
Yeah,
like that. And
yeah.
those are probably mellow by today's
Yeah.
standards, I'm sure. I can't. Yeah, I fucking. There's one Hostel I remember watching where they cut some fucking girl's eyeball out of her fucking head with a thing, and then he cut. I was like, no, fuck that. I can't do it.
I had some guy.
I'm too soft, I guess.
Well,
I don't know.
This guy in Japan asked me, "Oh, you seen this movie?" And it was one of these ones, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm familiar with it." And he's like, "What'd you think?" I'm like, "I don't really watch that stuff. I hear about it. I don't go there because I don't want it in my subconscious."
Fucking rights, man.
There's some stuff that you cannot unsee.
Yep.
And I've been on 4chan before they cracked down on 4chan, and actually they started like censoring it a little
Faces of
bit.
death kind of shit.
More than that, like
I got no time for that.
yeah, horrible shit pops up, and like I've got images in my brain that I've seen on 4chan before it was like kind of like cracked down that I'll never unsee, and just those little flashes in my memory are enough to know that horror exists out there somewhere, and that's really horrible. You know, and to know that evil is out there, and that
crazy
people
is,
are.
like, even if somebody asked you beforehand, you'd be like, "Well, yeah, I imagine so."
I
You know,
imagine
I'm sure
so.
it is, but now you know, and you're like, "Ah, fuck,
Yeah,
it's real."
That's when we talk about like child exploitation and human trafficking. There was a time on 4chan when there's a time on 4chan where that stuff was almost glorified, where they would share these images, right? And it's straight up disgusting, and people would get off on it. And you know what? There's another element with
Russ
this.
is getting hot over here. Calm down.
There's another element with the dark web. You know that. Oh, hold on. I'm just gonna get the dogs out of here. You know.
Oh no. There's nothing I like more. I wasn't even going to mention it for anybody who wasn't listening or was just listening.
Yeah, exactly.
No
There's this
dogs made an appearance just now.
pitter patter. All of a sudden, you see a Chihuahua face
Top
on the
3
video.
cutest dogs I've ever fucking seen.
But on the
Saw
dark
them
web,
anyway.
I've heard of, you can find these groups where legitimately it's sort of like that movie 8mm, where they are tight little like groups, and you have to pay big money to watch people being tortured and executed. So when we talk
We're
about
back down that goddamn conspiracy fucking hole again.
well, this
Because-
isn't any conspiracy. This is real.
I know,
stories.
right? But then that, even those kind of shit that gets tied in and blown out to the it's all satanic cult on top of it too.
right.
You know, I mean that's the core of it. That shit exists somewhere, and it's not thousands of people across the country, but it might be a handful. It might be 2 dozen.
Well, and okay, so let's look at the financial incentive for these people to do this shit. And it's the internet. It can be happening anywhere in the world. Let's say there's some Eastern European fucking lunatic who just disappears some girls from Croatia or Serbia or fucking Ukraine or Poland or Czech Republic, and that's just it. Let's say you only have 5 people that are willing to pay $5,000, to be part of a small little group that gets to watch a dismemberment video. No. There's people right there, 5 people, that's $25,000. The incentive is enough for organized crime to do that fucking video for this one person. Sure. They just got $25,000 to murder a person, and all they had to do is use their tech guy to stream it online on the dark web. Well, fuck, that's incentive enough. Yeah. There's also these like organized crime syndicates that are just like, here, this drug czar wants to have like a brothel. Here you go, here's a sea can full of women. There you go. How much is that going to be? Oh, that'll be like this brick of cocaine or whatever, right? Like, that shit's real. And
you know a lot of inside knowledge about how this whole fucking thing operates, Pat.
I'm familiar enough with a lot of that shit, you know.
That just reminded me that Andrew Schultz was the guy I was thinking of last week when I was talking about Flagrant 2. He's one of the guys, because you just posted one of his fucking videos where he was talking about having his video pulled down by Facebook.
Oh, that was him.
That was fucking
gold.
For him allegedly bullying
the president,
Ghislaine Maxwell. Because I mean, her and Epstein are clearly some of the biggest predators of our fucking time.
And what was his name again?
Andrew Schultz.
That video was great.
Yes,
it made me laugh my
It's
ass
really
off.
funny. And his first video about tearing her down, like he said, these are facts. He didn't conflate one fucking thing. He didn't make anything up. He's like, this is what's happening. And also, while we're at it, talking about this real quick, because I think that guy's hilarious and he's got a bit about this I want to talk about. But also, anybody who's reading this fucking Epstein shit, make sure you pay attention to the fact that every time they say woman, they mean child. Every time they say underage woman, underage prostitute, that's child. There's no underage prostitutes. You're a full-grown adult or you're a child. Those are the rules. So just bear that in mind when you're trying to decide whether or not this guy needs any fucking sympathy or she should fucking, well, I don't know, let's hear what she's got to say. Anyways, but his thing was, he says to his buddy, he's like, well, how good could Kid fucking be, though? You know what I mean? Like, because these guys, like, they're going to the fucking mat. They're paying millions of dollars and they're hiding it for generations and they're working this big fucking conspiracy campaign. He's like, you know, it must be great, right? I'm like, that's the wrong fucking approach.
Yeah, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there.
But that's what I thought of when you started saying, like, these people, they pay to watch somebody dismembered. I'm just like, I fucking don't have any of that in me. I don't even want to know it exists, let alone experience it. You know what I mean? Okay. So I guess I don't know.
So I guess, I've been around the fetish community for a very long time, and I know a lot of, like, I worked in the adult entertainment industry for a while. I remember when VHS was the only format that you could get this stuff on, and I remember seeing at the end of an Asian film, all of a sudden, an overdubbed bukkake scene, and it was just a concrete room with one girl in the room and all these guys using her, and I'm like, this is borderline consensual. I'm not sure what I'm watching here. This is pretty rank. So when I got the opportunity to travel to Japan and to meet some people that were involved with the Japanese fetish manufacturing area, one guy that I met was like, oh yeah, I watched this porn one time where this young girl was taken out into a field, raped and killed, and these two dudes drove away. And I'm like, well, that was simulated. And he's like, well, yeah, it's simulated. I'm like, that shit isn't erotic. Like, I didn't get mad at him, like, outside, but in my head, I'm like, that's not fucking erotic. That's, like, horrific. How can that, somebody's producing that fictional, you know what I mean? And that's being marketed as kind of like gore porn, horror porn, you know, kidnap and rape porn, and that's a thing in Japan. That's a genre in Japan. Now, what happens?
Sorry, I just think it's hilarious though that you're like, so yeah, I met with some of these people who produce this sort of thing, you know, and it's like I'm talking about other people's vacations. It's like my ties on the beach. Maybe I'll do some fucking snorkeling.
Yeah, I go to hardcore places and do hardcore things. So I'm meeting people that have produced over 1,000 adult bondage films, like the guy I was learning from, and so he's a nice guy. He was very much, you know, compassionate, take care of the people you play with. But at the same time, I'm also meeting people that my sensei is like, we don't engage with them. They're too hardcore. They're mean. They're cruel. And so if there's this market for this fictional stuff, that means there's probably a market for the real stuff.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and in Tokyo, one of the world centers with like the export of like billions and billions. There's billionaires in that town that are connected with organized crime in that town, that are connected with the human trafficking market from Asia, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all of these people that are very, very poor that get marketed into like human trafficking in one way or another. Woof.
You know what? If you think about it, like any of this kind of stuff you're talking about is kind of a rich person's world. Mm-hmm. Like a person making a regular income couldn't afford to do this. I mean, maybe they could go to some other like third world country and exploit somebody there for a reasonable price, I guess. But to be into those higher upper echelon kind of fucking things where you're talking about they're trading people and shit. So I would love to talk to somebody who understands the psychology of people at that level of wealth. Like, is there something about that where like you feel like you're so far above everybody else around you that then you engage in these activities, or is it that there's just seems to be a disproportionate amount of these fucking kind of people that get to that level? Because that's like, to me, I'm just thinking it's like, or is it just because other people haven't had the opportunity to really take advantage of people? I don't know what any of those are.
The psychological profile of the people that excel in the capitalist business scheme are sociopathic.
Right?
That is the is the process. To become a CEO, you have to be able to fuck people over to survive. And those people that excel at fucking people over because you're the only important thing get to the top of those heaps. You can't become a billionaire by giving a shit about other
absolutely,
people.
Yeah.
Hell,
and
I have a business, and I'm ethically conflicted about not doing enough for my community. You give me $1 million, I'm like, oh no, I can't keep all this fucking. Hey kid, here you go, right? But now somebody who's like, fuck that kid. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna fuck that kid, and like, so that's just a regular.
That's
thing.
what I'm saying, though, right? So that's what. Okay, so that's what I'm wondering now. Is that just these type of people that can get to these positions have that in them, and then they're really good at justifying it to themselves, so they try to make other people believe that there's all these other people doing this kind of fucking thing because, well, I would if I was in that situation, so why wouldn't you? Or is it like you couldn't get to those positions without having that a bit of that in you, so it almost shows like, well, no, I can't be that kind of fucking monster, I can't even get to that echelon, you know, and I don't have the drive to do it, because maybe that's what drives them. Well, I would love to know somebody who knew some shit about this to explain it to me, because it really seems kind of fucked that it's not like I mean, if there's these, like you say, you can each pitch in $25,000 and watch this person be dismembered or whatever. Was there not like a $500 version of that? Well, you know what I mean? And then are people that it's
to some degree, yes. Because when I was in Japan, my sensei, the guy who taught me shibari, the Japanese rope art of bondage, people could go to him every 2 weeks and pay $200, $300 and watch him do a BDSM cabaret, where he would take, a small Japanese lady and, oh, come here and I tie you up and hang you up. She's like, no, no. And he'd spank her a little bit and spin her around and bring her down, cuddle her and send her on her way. And that, well, it is. That's why I was there. I'm like, this is hot. But it's very ground level. It's very ground level. But then we were meeting people that were like martial artists and like high level, like they knew anatomy, they knew rope, they knew martial arts. So there's no reason they should be accidentally breaking women's limbs. But they're breaking women's limbs. And so if these guys are paying $200 to go watch my sensei do this like entry level slap and tickle, there's people that are going to be paying thousands to watch this guy do whatever. And then, you know what? On a different level, there's going to be people paying multiple thousands to watch these guys do whatever.
Well, and I wonder if that's kind of how you get there too. Then maybe do people just start out going right to that top level, or do they gradually work their way up, become more comfortable with what they see, and go, well, I want to push the limit?
This was linked with my nervous breakdown in Japan, because I had to remember abuse that I went through as a kid, and then I realized that I'm on the ground floor of a world that goes really deep, and the people that I'm meeting are involved with this trade. And this trade goes that deep. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm on the other side of the planet right here with these people. Whether it's like organized crime or the porn or...
Well, and again, you're on an island that small, you're starting to think like, what are they, a mile and a half away from me?
They are.
Are you 2 miles that way?
Literally.
Yeah.
It's Tokyo. It's built on top. Like,
you could be 500 feet above me.
Downtown. It could be in the basement of this building. Like, and realistically, the place I was staying at was where they do photography for a lot of this bondage stuff. So who knows what's in the other areas of the building, right? So yeah, I freaked right out. I beat up a guy pretty bad, thinking he was involved with human trafficking, ended up in the hospital and ended up in jail for it and got shipped back home. But that's just my personal trip. Now, so I'm kind of familiar with like this stuff and how it works. Like, and part of that trip of me having my nervous breakdown is I really had to examine what about kink drew me towards it. You know what I mean? The psychology of it. And it's about power. It's about how much power do I want to have over another individual. But luckily, the ethical checks and balances there was consent. How much does another person want to give me power to play, right? And I think that's a very important balance. Like, you and I engage, and you might take a step back so I can say some words. I might take a step back so you can say some words, because that's a give and take. Now, if I just want to dominate the conversation, whether it's consensual or not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that goes from a very micro level of conversation to the macro level of nations just invading other nations. Now, these people that want to play with these games of power how far do they want to impose their will on another without consent? Like
Well,
that's
and I wonder if there are those that are involved in those systems where they are high enough where they can have control and they can show influence, and
because they can get out of anything.
but they can do it out in the public. They can do it out in the open, and maybe because that's what they want, or also maybe because they haven't checked out that venue where they're like, no, this is again a place where power and control can be negotiated and you can exert it to whatever degree you agree to. I'm just saying, what I'm getting at here is maybe there needs to be a little more kink involved at higher levels of government, maybe. You
Well,
know
I
what
think
mean?
everybody needs to be talking about consent
Yeah.
and what consenting adults should be allowed to do with each other.
Yeah.
Now, that I think is a little bit of a vent on a pressure cooker that stops it from exploding or becoming malignant.
Yeah.
But I also believe that there's a certain personality that is lacking empathy. They are the only important thing in their psychology.
Yeah.
Nothing outside themselves is important.
Yeah.
I am the only important thing. So I have a right to do whatever the fuck I want on my external environment. And
And again, that mentality right there. How often does that take you to CFO or
Yes.
regional sales manager?
exactly.
Or whatever?
Like, sorry, I don't mind robbing you and selling you a bad piece of real estate or a bad vehicle or a bad business plan, because that's not a problem. I'm getting the money and you signed the contract.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care that I lied to you. You signed the contract.
Yeah.
I have no ethics.
You shouldn't
here.
have been so dumb.
Yes, yeah, sorry,
What
you
do you do? Let
agreed.
me
You
take
should have
advantage
read
of
all
you.
the small print.
Yeah.
So that allows these people to
I should be thinking of that guy in Langham.
Which guy in Langham? I don't
The guy with the house where he was fucking.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
His own commercial and residential somehow for a bit. Then all of a sudden he's got a house he can't live in.
Yeah, exactly. And
No,
then
the
he goes
paperwork
to
changed. You can't live here anymore.
Yeah, he goes to the town. Hey, man, you know, I bought this residential house. I'm living there, and you're evicting me. You're charging me $2,500 a month now.
Oh, a day.
Yeah, was it a day?
I believe it was a
Yeah,
day.
yeah, $2,500 if I don't leave my house. And they're like, oh, shitty. So this is like,
them's the rules.
yeah, exactly. And the more you don't give a fuck about the little man, the further you can get. You don't mind clear cutting an area of an indigenous people's land for profit? Well, sorry, that's just the way it is.
No, I'll get my bonus.
Yeah,
Bonus
exactly.
me up, bud.
Exactly.
See you later, squirrels.
So to me, it's the same deal. Like, you know, people don't like to hear that, you know, imperialism is rape. but imperialism is rape, you know?
Yeah, no, it's forcible. There's no consent.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
funny too, because I frequently hear the phrase, you know, like that dairy is rape, you know, and I'm like, I agree, I totally understand that, but I'm like, there's a different way to say that to get people, you know, like I'm showing you how wrong you are. Dairy's rape, and you're like, wait, what? Hold on, you hit me with the hard R right now.
The hard R.
Yeah, come with the hard R.
But, you know, I think if people really follow it to its logical conclusion and they really look at what's doing, they have to own that. But those
It's hard to find another word that fits better than that.
See, I came
For
up
that
with the
type
word
of violation of consent.
writing, because I blogged a lot. I got like over 100 blog entries. I'm thinking about doing a book on kink one time, and I came up with a word after I came back from Japan and I had my nervous breakdown and unpacked a lot of this, and the word was aconsive. A being without and cons being consent. Without consent. So something is an aconsive principle. I do what I want regardless of your consent. And it could be, you know, a predator downing a gazelle. That's
Or how
an
about I'm going to smoke in this restaurant. I don't
whether
give
you
a
like it or not.
fuck.
Yeah, a predator, a leopard attacking a gazelle. That's a consive. Israel moving Palestine out of the way is a consive, you know. And rape is an aconsive principle. So if you think about something that is the principle of doing what they will regardless of consent, that's, I would consider, an aconsive principle. And we don't have an English word for it. So people use things like rape. Come on, guys, you're not even listening to me. Just drink
I'm
your
listening
fucking
to you talk.
beers.
Tell your rape
Anyways,
stories, Pat.
Tell your rape stories. Fuck me. Oh, this one.
Yeah, there we go. That's where you're at. You're at the fuck me part of your rape story.
Fuck me. Yeah, exactly.
Stone
We're recording Less Rape, More Rock. Let's go.
More songs about ducks.
Okay, so
And I've
yeah.
been fucking a duck, and then I fucked a stork.
Man, I listened to some of my favorite country and western songs this morning. I listened to Dolly Parton's Jolene. Love that song. And Kenny Rogers, Don't Take Your Love to Town. Fuck, I love that. And what is it? I don't know who sings it, but the Harper Valley PTA. Some of my favorite
I think
songs.
that's Dolly goddamn Parton.
No, it's somebody else. But yeah, trust me. I'm pretty sure. Don't.
Folks at home, we'll see.
We will see. You Google it. Harper Valley PTA. It's great. I play it for my daughter. She laughs. I play it for my ex. She's like, it's about me.
It's a lady, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Okay.
Yeah. Well, they're all the same.
Loretta Lynn was maybe my next guess, but I don't know that many old
Yeah,
country
yeah.
music ladies.
Either way, but yeah, I like a lot of that. So speaking of music, I want to get off like the dark and doomy, you know,
I don't even know what we're
non-consent
talking
chat. Yeah, I don't even know. So back to another favorite one of my horror rock bands,
Uh-huh.
the Misfits.
Uh-huh.
The Misfits.
Oh, sorry, real quick. Fucking Chai Pig died.
Yeah.
We just,
It's Jeannie Riley, Harper Valley PTA.
Oh, fuck. I had no
Yes,
idea.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I'd say that's just it. I don't
Weird.
remember her name.
No, sorry, Chai
Chai
Pig
Pig
died.
died, yeah, rest in
SNFU,
peace.
so
Rest
fucking
in peace, Chai.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Fucking, I'd make some comment. I was like, well, I'd say he was taken before his time, but he had a good fucking run, man.
Yeah,
you
he
know what I
did.
mean? Like,
Well-
one of the most influential Canadian punk rock artists of all time, and like, is artist in as many ways as you can be, as eccentric
Yes,
and
yes.
like. And it was never a show.
Lyricist and
That dude was
singer.
full time all the time. You ever met Chai Pig? He was always Chai Pig. He was never. It was not a show. That was him. And one of the most iconic voices, I think. He just really stood out. It was beautiful, and it was like even to the end, the dude could really fucking sing, man.
Yep.
Intelligent lyrics, well thought. Like SNFU, fucking beauty. So
I definitely
listen to some of
feel
that shit.
I definitely feel Chai Pig is one of those tortured artists.
Yep. Oh,
his
totally.
entire life, you know. Like
Yep.
I think there's a lot of these people. Actually, it's weird. On one of the forums one time, this tattooist forum I was on, somebody asked a really good question. They're like, "So what is it about artists specifically that seems to have a draw towards substance addiction and substance abuse?" And somebody pointed out that like artists are generally sensitive individuals,
Yeah.
and that sensitivity tends to cause them to need to dull that sensitivity.
Sure.
Or sometimes there's trauma or any of that stuff. So
Well, if they can convey emotion through paint or writing or music, I mean, you're feeling a lot of it then, right? You need to dull that shit in some way if it's heavy. And a lot of times, it's the tortured artist. I don't know if it's tortured because of their art necessarily. Somebody's
yeah.
tortured previously, and then this is what comes out of it. You know?
exactly.
And then maybe that develops. But I don't know anybody who is making like, no, I've never really had any sort of issues, and I made some beautiful art right off the bat.
pop culture.
Well, I'm nicer than that.
I started at the Walt Disney Club or
Yeah,
Mickey Mouse
yeah,
Club, and
well,
now
and exactly, you got Mickey Mouse level material.
yes.
But yeah, Chai
Chai
Pig.
Pig.
Yeah, fucking R.I.P.
So yeah, back new news. Michael Graves from the Misfits has recently tweeted, because we're
That's what we're talking
social
about.
social justice or
The guy
social
sort of
networks.
used to be in the Misfits, yeah.
Used to be in the
sort of
Misfits.
used to be like 3 albums.
Yeah, we're social network or social media savvy. He tweeted that he is now a member of the Proud Boys.
Oh,
And
really?
He is a proud
Oh, my
Western chauvinist,
God.
and he will make no apologies about our culture being.
Well, you know what? And this isn't even news to anybody who's ever heard this fucking guy talk
It was news to
outside
me.
of music. Oh, no, okay, fair enough.
yeah,
Sorry,
I didn't
Sorry.
know anything
He's
about
always
him.
been a staunch right wing conservative. He's been a pundit on news programs about it as
Really?
like the voice of right wing punk rock. And you're like,
That's a thing.
I don't think that exists.
See, I
you know?
didn't know that was a thing
Yeah.
until.
Well, I mean, pick a thing. It's been bastardized by somebody, right? Somebody's taken somebody when I like the tune, I like the beat. Well, let's just make it a little bit more of my perspective.
Yeah, I guess. But Misfits were never really political. They were antisocial.
Their music was never
Horror.
political. Yes, exactly. So that's why it flew under the radar so long, because you never ever heard him say what he thought unless it was about digging up a grave or
Skulls
being a
and
werewolf
zombies
or
and
some other
aliens,
bullshit,
yeah.
right? Which I love the fuck out of. But
it's
you
weird.
never hear any of that. And I would think, honestly, just because, like even Jerry Only, he's an elderly gentleman from New Jersey at this point in his life. That dude's probably pretty fucking conservative, I bet.
Well, and
if you
they
asked
come
him his
from
political values
a
and views.
business family.
Yes.
Exacto
Yeah.
knives or like a razor knife, very much like Exacto. Like
Okay.
Doyle and Jerry's family
Oh, I didn't
are
know.
like a blade manufacturing corporation. They like their
So
dad.
they come from some sort of money.
Yes, they
as
come
well,
from money.
they're-
So
yeah.
like usually that
More
right wing
likely
people,
you're right leaning.
they
Yes.
want to keep that money. They
Yeah.
like, I don't want a union. I don't want
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So
Yeah, so when you're singing about all the corpses hanging headless and limp, and a lot of your political views doesn't come up so much. Right?
yeah.
So
Danzig, they were never a politically correct band, and
one of the least, especially for the time. People are like throw shade at Misfits now. They're like, oh, horror punk, aren't they kind of played out? They're still doing the same shtick, and you're like, yeah, okay, cool, but like, if you picture them in fucking 78 or 79
Yeah.
or 80 or
80s,
81, 82,
yeah.
like, they were fucking gnarly for the time.
they were
And
punching
still-
people, they were attacking people,
Yeah,
they were
man.
singing about like chopping
They were just as
people
pissed
up.
off and angry as everybody else, but they weren't necessarily fucking, fuck the system. It was, it was still subversive in some ways. I mean, bullets about Kennedy being assassinated in a very disturbing roundabout way. Well, not even roundabout, I guess, but it's a disturbing way to fucking talk about
Well,
it.
they talked about a lot of politically incorrect content. They were definitely not a political band. They were politically incorrect.
Yeah.
And,
Counterculture for fucking sure.
well, 100%. And, like, they were, like, interested in violence. And,
Yeah, it wasn't just the gore for the shock and the horror, like fucking Kiss spitting blood on stage. They're still singing about their love gun and getting chicks. Misfits weren't singing songs about getting chicks. I mean,
Unless they
pulling
were
their-
dead.
pulling their parts off or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah, killing moms.
And again, many of it was based on movies. A lot of it wasn't necessarily fucking... I don't know why I'm doing this fucking history of the Misfits, but for anybody who's not fucking aware, I guess, lots of it, you listen to a Misfits song, you go and find the movie that it was written
you
about.
could definitely.
You know what I mean? There was
Teenagers
always
from
that...
Mars,
fucking Where Eagles Dare, even their song, like their name Misfits, it's from a fucking Marilyn Monroe movie.
Yep.
You know,
And
so,
Crimson Skull, their logo is from another, was it Plan 9 or...
I know exactly what you're talking about. I can
Russ is
picture
wearing
the
a
fucking-
Misfits shirt while we're here.
They've
But-
infiltrated everyone.
Okay, so Glenn Danzig was a fairly politically incorrect guy for the day, and then when he went on to go into Danzig, he kind of took that step towards the spooky, officially satanic.
Yeah,
I like
more
to think,
occult.
yes, occult, and I'd like satanic, occult
Sure,
is all that
fair enough.
stuff.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Misfits, I'd like to think that at one time they were sort of like the death metal of punk. You know, like they had that spooky, evil vibe.
They were
but
a
it
lot
was,
heavier, harder than like the fast paced stuff. It was still fast, but it was heavier riffs.
Yes, and it was like Halloween, very Halloween-y.
Yeah.
But when he went on to Danzig, he kind of took that step towards being more formally evil. Like,
I'm sorry for everybody that got that burst in your fucking earballs, but yeah, no, absolutely, much more evil.
and apparently,
Black earthing.
yeah, Jerry Only and Doyle went on, or maybe just Jerry Only, I'm not sure. They had a band called Christ the Conqueror, which was like a born-again Christian band. And I remember reading articles where Jerry was very upset with Danzig trying to get the kids into Satanism.
Well, I remember hearing Only talk about being Catholic.
Oh,
Even.
really?
Like not just like into religion. He's like, no, I got a specific one. I was raised that way.
Yeah.
Like,
That's the thing. I've got, well, anybody watching the videos, I pulled out some old VHS that I had here of like the first Danzig video and Rollins talking from the box. And it's funny because in that, Danzig is like, oh yeah, this is my library. And he's sitting in this little tiny hovel and he's like, this is my library of spooky things, of werewolves and the occult roots of Nazism. So, you know, these guys were politically incorrect, but realistically, it wasn't overt. Like, I really believe this. You know what I mean? As opposed to Michael Graves saying that he's a proud Western chauvinist.
well, that's a political angle instead of being politically incorrect. That's a political stance.
I'm taking
this
this
is
stance.
entertainment, what they enjoy, what they believe, what their religion is, whatever that is. That's
it's
not
like
necessarily-
philosophy.
Yes,
you
it's
know.
not of their political leaning. But Michael Graves, staunchly right wing is not surprise to me. And,
Well, the Proud Boys are kind of a weird organization, right? Like, they tread the line between being an official hate group or officially being fascist and then just saying, well, we're a multi-ethnic group of people that just really like Western society. And that's their trademark is like, we're Western chauvinists. And look, we got brown guys in our group and we got gay guys in our group. And like, you know, we're
as long as you're for America and you're with me.
Well, as long as Western society built this culture and we really believe in that. And I guess in some degrees you got that right, but it's a slippery slope into overt,
and that's always
like,
a thin
racism
veneer.
and
Whatever
thin veneer is a good
whatever
word.
bullshit fucking thing those groups can pull out into the public to make it look like they're not hate groups. It's always a thin veneer because as soon as you get through that, you go, well, so what's your core beliefs? Well, let me get crazy on you then, and then you always get to the real core crazy on it. And it's always and again, it's always the same shit. It's always racism. It's always fucking classism. It's always the same garbage.
Well, I used to love Gavin McInnes. You know, are you familiar with his stuff
Yep.
from Vice when he was in Vice? And he was a fucking hilarious comedian. He had a couple videos here like Sophie Can Walk. You can find it on YouTube. Or what was the other one here? Baby Workout, Lose Those Pounds Dad Style are two of my favorite Gavin McInnes like comedy videos. And I laugh my ass off every time I watch them because they're that good. And he had a book called Pissing in Public that I read, and it was a great book. And so then I hear, oh, he's got this group called the Proud Boys. What are they about? And I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing some weird shit, and they got kind of wearing the skinhead outfits. And
well,
I'm
and
like,
sorry, and is that his group or did he get attached to them?
It started.
Like, was he
started,
part of it?
He founded
Sorry,
it.
because what I thought was that some of the things he said have been kind of co-opted perhaps by some of these, because I didn't know when I first started hearing of him and hearing him speak, I didn't get that he was some right wing kind of fucking guy. He was a comedian. He had maybe views along that. You know what I mean? And then I feel like some of his stuff maybe got a little co-opted by groups that were like, oh yeah, this guy says stuff. He can kind of be our voice.
I think he started snowballing, and
then
he had to double down on the shit that he was saying.
And especially like if you're an Alex Jones or something like that who's creating a character that is kind of you.
That's
you know what I mean?
kind of what
then
I
you have
think
to lean
happened with
into
him.
it and go, well, no, this is what I'm doing. Well, he's kind of a character, but it's my name. But I'm doing it for the show. But I don't really believe that. But I believe some of it. But I don't get the crazy stuff. Just the
That's
core
exactly
thing.
it.
You know what I mean? And it's like this nice, weird, wishy-washy world that you get to live in and not really be held accountable for saying crazy fucking things. But you're not doing it like a full-blown performer, like in Andrew Dice Clay, for example. So when he's doing that spit, you're like, no, this isn't him. This is the grossest part of him. personified and made into a caricature.
Well,
right?
and he says it's comedy. Can't you laugh? It's a joke.
Yeah.
You don't like
Yeah.
you don't like
Yeah.
jokes. You're attacking me as comedy. But at the same time, I started a group of people that have the same sense of humor about the same politically incorrect jokes.
Where's the humor in it?
Yeah,
right.
yeah. It's like, oh yeah, don't trust Jews. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, you just all like my brand of humor. That's all
that's
it is.
That's it. So then, the next thing you know, these guys, these frat boys with like Fred Perry shirts with the black with the yellow stripes, they sign up and they all go hang out and they crack jokes and and
Talk like the boys used to,
Yeah.
like when you're down at the club, you could just say what you wanted.
And exactly and then 5 of them come across one of those Antifa guys. Oh, let's smack this guy around a little bit. Well, that's when you kind of cross the line between being a bunch of guys cracking jokes and being part of a fraternity and actually being a gang or a terrorist
And again,
organization.
the base core of that fraternity is the jokes are racist and
Yes.
they're bigoted and they're shitty and they're sexist.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
chauvinistic
that's
or-
again your core values that you've got tied together. You can put whatever other shit, whatever uniform you want to wear, or whatever sloganeering you want to do. The core of it's still like, and I want my neighborhood to stay looking the way I want it to.
So it really makes me wonder now that Michael Graves is officially linked with this
Yeah.
organization, if he's going to step into some kind of role of being like a figurehead because he's a celebrity now, and he's like, oh, I love the Misfits. And
I
you got to
hope
think,
so. Please to fuck.
Yeah.
Let Michael Graves become the face of the Proud Boys with his
man.
idiotic makeup.
See, I don't know anything about-
Well, he wears that makeup all the fucking time.
What?
Yes, sir.
Holy shit.
You see him in an
Okay.
interview, you see him walking down the street, motherfucker's got that makeup on. And he sounds like how you would think he sounds. As soon as you start talking to him, he starts spouting his bullshit, and you can't have a conversation with him because anybody who's ever interviewed him, it can't be a discussion because he's there with his talking points that he wants to push.
That's just
like
it. It's
every
like,
one of them that do that,
yeah.
right? So it's not there to. I'm not here to participate. I'm here to take over with my bullshit.
Well, it's interesting because I'm gonna play some flippy floppy here because what
Oh,
one
turn
of
the
my-
cameras off. We're gonna play flippy floppy.
flippy floppy.
Or go infrared. It's got to be in the dark either.
Because I watched a
It's not much
lecture-
floppy from me.
I watched
More
a
flippy.
lecture with one of
You're not going to talk about my penis stuff.
No, I don't want to talk about you, Dink. So one of my favorite lecturers is Jordan Peterson, who everybody on the right seems to be in love with and everybody on the left hates. But he has a very good point coming from a background of psychology, where if you talk to an individual to find out if it's their opinion and if they're talking authentically, you just got to listen to whether they're saying anything that isn't just, like you said, a talking point or something that somebody else just fed them and they're regurgitating. Whether they're coming with their own interpretation of that. That's when you're talking to
and
the...
a lot of times you see that through projection. They get their talking points, their talking points, their talking points. Well, yeah, and that's what they do then, right? They just take advantage of them and they steal everything. And you go, well, is that what you think? Well, no, but I don't try to pay more taxes than I need to, and if I can hide a little bit extra, that's what I'll do. And I mean, like, that's what they always project that, right? Anybody who's trying to, the loudest voice in the room screaming against it is usually fucking guilty of that kind of shit.
Well, yeah.
And
oh God.
The green or the orange.
Don't listen to our podcast.
The orange.
All these things are yelling about, like,
everybody's angry. Everybody's pissed off. Everybody's got
Technically,
short dinks.
Dusty and I rule the world. Anyways.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. The nuance and all of this stuff is removed with like both the hard left and the hard left, or hard left and hard right.
Yeah.
I think
the extremists of anything.
yes,
right? No
context and
whatsoever.
nuance have been removed, and nobody wants to hear any oppositional opinion. You're automatically a member of the enemy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I had this conversation. I don't want to bring it up here, but basically it revolved around accountability. If you've been traumatized, how much are you responsible for your behavior? You know what I mean? And I'm a firm believer, and I don't care if you're right, left, up, down, whatever, that you need to own your own shit. You know what I mean? Before you can change your behavior, it doesn't matter how you got there. You need to say, oh, I fucked up, and I'm not going to fuck up anymore, and I'm going to try and heal from this. Now, you can't keep saying, you did this to me, it's your fault, I don't have to be responsible because I'm a victim. The more you do that, and it could also be like on the right where they're like, oh, I don't need to account for being an oppressive influence because you're the guys committing crime and you're the ones who are robbing my bike or whatever the fuck it is. Everybody's pointing the finger saying it's you and not me. And if everybody turned around and said, hey, it's me and not you, and I'm going to work on me, guess what? Everybody gets better. But as long as you're pointing the finger...
but I'm not wrong, though.
Yeah, right?
I've never been. I've never been wrong.
It blows my mind. And I just read a fucking another article. What is this? Oh, jeez, I gotta... It's Cape Breton, an island, Nova Scotia. You know Cape Breton? It's a small island, Nova Scotia. Whole shitload of property is being bought up by Nazi sympathizers from Germany to move to Canada, to immigrate to Canada, to set up their little segregation state because they figured that this is the best place to establish a German colony of neo-Nazis. Or
Interesting.
not even neo-Nazis, but leftover Nazis. So it's a very interesting, right? So,
Well, you know what? I have no problem with Canada being a place that Nazis want to come to die. If that's what they're doing, if this is some sort of holistic retreat where they're all going to come
This is
here
where we go
and
to die.
we're gonna fucking Kevorkian them real quick, by all means, come aboard.
Okay, so let's do the math here. My parents were born in 51 and 50, right? So that means they are technically baby boomers. Their parents came, or my grandpa came home for World War II, ran into wife, had babies, boom, boom, boom. Like, that's the baby boom. Now, that would mean that I would be like, with the Allies, there's a war, children, next generation. But that shit still happened in Germany. That stuff still happened where these guys finished a war, came home, made babies, taught that family their value system, whether they won or lost the war, and then those parents taught the next generation the value system. It may not be popular, you can't say it out loud on the street.
It's not even legal there.
Yeah, you can't wave these
popular
flags, but this stuff, it's only 2 generations removed. Yeah. It's 2 generations removed.
And for anybody who was on the opposite side, on the losing side of this, that's a fresh raw wound.
It
you
is
know, like
still.
I mean, and as much as people like all of a sudden seem to forget about fucking the Holocaust, you know what I mean? Like people are like, well, I guess that still happens, doesn't it? Because that wasn't that long ago. But the other side that was committing it remembers it and remembers being fucking held accountable for it and being like, no, it would have been our fucking way. We would have had it. And I'm telling you, Grandpa was right the whole goddamn time.
Yes, or they're still saying that like the Holocaust didn't exist, or if it did happen,
Oh, they
it was
blew it out of
justified,
proportion.
or
Yep, yep.
that's
They were
just what
criminals
happens in war.
anyways. Yep.
All of that stuff. So
Like
these
we do,
people,
yep.
these people that are moving to Cape Breton, what was it? I think I've written it down here. Der Spiegel. If you look up Cape Breton, Der Spiegel, Nazis, it'll tell you that these people aren't even neo-Nazis. They're leftover Nazis.
They're not even the new ones.
Yeah, they're the old ones
These
that
are
are still
rewormed.
believing
Yeah.
this shit.
Oh,
They
for
never
sure.
died. And,
For sure. I wouldn't doubt it for a fucking second. You didn't catch them all.
I dated this girl, and she was German in Saskatchewan, and I went to her Easter, she conned me into meeting her parents for Easter one day, and I'm like, fuck, I don't like that. But whatever. So we're sitting there, and her dad is like, well, Pat, there's oil and there's water, and you can shake them together, and they even look similar for a while, but eventually the natural order is that they separate because they are not the same. And it's the same thing when you have like a pure water supply and salt water goes into that pure water supply. It contaminates the entire pond. You cannot mix these 2 streams. And he's just going off as so a matter of factly about like, this is the way of life. This is the way of life. And I'm like looking right through it, and I told her, you should tell your dad my last name isn't Burke, it's Berg, Berg. And see how that was, she's like, no.
Bergenstein.
Yeah, just Berg, Pat
Christine.
Berg. And yeah. So that was kind of a weird one, and that was really
Tell him my
strange.
last name is, I'm going to bury you out in the back 40, you old prick. You fucking keep his talk up.
Well, and that was just it. And
Fuck.
yeah, it really blew my mind, because that generation is the children of the people that got defeated in World War II, and an entire nation got swept up with that propaganda, with that fervor of like Sieg Heil, all that shit.
No, and it didn't stay put. There was Nazi rallies in Western Hemisphere during that time.
No, Ford. With yeah. Well,
Yep.
he wrote the
Henri.
International Jew. Like, this is your Ford truck, Ford Motor Company. Helped build like the tanks.
I guess like that's you're not even looking hard to find something terrible in that fucking background. But I mean, you start looking like everything we have is built on some form of fucking oppression or colonialism.
See, this is a very interesting
But
point.
I guess that doesn't mean you have to negate it all too, right? You can still take the positive aspects of it, but understand that it was built on negativity. Because I think that's all anybody wants a lot of times is go like, you know what? I don't need to destroy this whole fucking thing. I just need to know that you understand that it wasn't built fairly, right? You know that it isn't a fair system from the get-go. You can fix it.
I want everybody who can hear this on their cell phones or on a computer to recognize that we are all part of exploitation.
Yeah.
There's nothing in our Western society that isn't the benefit of exploitation of somebody or something else. Whether it's the leather on this table coming from an animal that didn't want to die, the lithium in my fucking cell phone being taken from a mine somewhere of people that didn't want to mine it, the land being
t-shirts
stripped.
we're wearing.
100% slave labor, or child labor, maybe Indonesian people. Everything in our culture is the product of exploitation, and I think the most we can do is recognize that this is where we live, and this is we're part of that. We're a part of that.
Well, to me, I think it's like if you see that there's flaws in this system, it's like, that doesn't mean destroy. That means fix.
Yeah.
You got a cancer, you got a tumor, you cut it out. You treat it. You don't fucking just write the body off. You
Yeah,
figure out
yeah.
how to fix those problems. So that's the benefit to this. So when we admit it out loud and say, yeah, okay, I'm fucking wearing a t-shirt that was probably made through child labor. I'm unhappy about that.
What can I do to change
Exactly.
that?
What can
Maybe-
I do in the future? What can I be more conscious of where I'm buying them from? Can I make sure that if I hear that becoming an issue with somebody at an international level, maybe I can use my vote to dictate how that fucking goes. You know, like whatever way it is that you feel like you can engage and do that, but again, denying that it exists because you feel like you might be somehow culpable for it because you're part of that group that did that, even if you were detached from it by fucking hundreds of years, doesn't do any goddamn good.
Every single
and it doesn't
person,
keep you safe either.
Every single person in Western society is benefiting from exploitation. Every single person. If you're living in America, in North America, fuck, even Europe, you are benefiting from exploitation of South America, of Africa, of
there
somewhere else.
wasn't a road or a railroad that was built before 100 fucking years ago,
Nothing
even
you
50
own.
years ago here, that
paper-
wasn't built on exploitation.
The paper you're using to write on, the pens you're using, the phones you're using, the computers, the wire, the gold, everything is coming from an exploitation. There's a short story called...
And sorry, hold on. It's not just of the other that's being exploited as well. We personally are being fucking exploited.
Oh, yeah.
Even I was just drinking this beer and thinking about, yeah, fucking barley. There's probably some exploitation in there.
100%.
And absolutely, when you start getting rid of
Monocrops.
things of like the fucking the wheat board to actually help and fight for farmers so they can make sure they get a fair shake, and all of a sudden, it's an open market, but then there's these huge conglomerates that dictate how much everything is, and they can kind of really hold people fucking hostage. That's you being part of this system and being exploited.
Well, even if you take it like as a vegan, we have to consider the fact that monocropping destroys the soil. It causes damage
Sure.
to the natural ecosystem and the biodiversity of any land.
Yeah.
And so even like if you're like
Even doing that for the right reason still fucks
You're
with
still
the,
participating
Still
in
fucks
it.
with the mice. Still fucks with the birds that are in that migratory fucking area. Still fucks with the foliage that's there that gives wildlife fucking homes.
the soy farming to create all of my ethical alternatives to meat, it causes damage to the environment. Like so all of that stuff. There's this short story. It's called Those Who Walk Away from Olemas. I might be wrong on that. I'll put it on the video if you watch it. But Olemas is Olemas. And it's about these people that live in this beautiful society. There's parades. They want for nothing. Everybody's loving life. And there's like children celebrating and parents and da-da-da-da-da. And this city and this like city state, they operate without want. But the ticket is that once in their life, they have to go to this cell in the city and witness this neglected child that doesn't get fed, that has zero love, that lives in filth and squalor, chained to a wall. And that child has to suffer so that the entire city can flourish. And you have to witness it at one time. And if you go back to living your life knowing that that is the cost of the life that you're living, I guess you can live in this city. But there are those people that cannot handle the fact that that one child has to suffer for the rest of this city, and they walk away from this town called Olemas, and that's what the story is called.
And they still don't do anything to help the child.
They don't know what they can do. They just they leave the city. They don't want to participate if this one child has to suffer, and they don't know where they're going, but that's where they go. And I think about this short story. It's only like 4 or 5 pages. I recommend you could find it online in a PDF. I recommend anybody who's listening to read that story because it really puts in context living in our society. I can have the best ethics ever. Am I willing to go back to the Philippines and help that kid in the rubble and hold their hand and try and feed them? And
Well, I think that's
to
where a
give
lot of
up my
people get
life?
defeated, because once you start having these thoughts and you start going down that road, then you're like, well, am I ever doing enough then? Well, can I ever? And should I even start then? And if it is, do I make a difference? Is it so bleak and so huge and I can never make enough that it's ever going to matter? You know what I mean? And I think that people get caught up in that too. But then you come back to like, well, no, maybe I can just do what I can do. And if I'm being honest with myself and being fair with myself that this is what I can do, then that's fine. But if you think about it and you're like, well, no, I could do something else. There is something within my power that's not going to inconvenience me so greatly that all of a sudden I have to live at a much lower standard of comfortability. If I can still do that and be as comfortable as I am, maybe I'm going to do that.
See, I think that's kind of where I am at. I try, but I'm very much aware of the child that has to suffer for my society, and I'm forcing myself as much as I do my meditation on gratitude and what I appreciate in my life. I also meditate on the fact that things have to die every day or exploited every day, so I have the basic luxuries that I have. And this is the tragedy of life in our society.
But again, that's caused by a bigger issue of hoarding of wealth and that sort of thing, because once you start actual dispersal of wealth and there's no more billionaires, a lot of that erases. A lot of that is you can afford to automate all the t-shirt manufacturings and not have slave wages paid to children to fucking do it.
But
and
how do those children even eat?
That's what I'm saying though, is once you disperse that wealth properly and you have it
Oh,
good,
yeah,
then it's the billionaires don't exist anymore. That's feeding children. That's educating people. That's keeping people home and clothed and all those basic necessities. Because if you think about it, I mean, even in your own budgeting throughout your life, a lot of the things that just make you exist aren't the bulk of your fucking expense. The bulk of your expense is your insurance and your fuel and your car payment and your fucking student loan and your credit card debt,
interest,
trips and Christmas presents and all those things. It's not water, it's not electricity, it's not, those aren't most people's bulk unless you're extremely below the poverty line and you are still doing those things. Then it is, and
it's
you're
a
just
system of
barely
consumerism
existing.
that you're talking
That's
about.
it, right? And if you erase that, well, then it gets to be to get everybody's needs met in a society. I believe honestly is much more fucking reasonable, especially if there aren't ones hoarding massive amounts of it.
See, this is where I think things get complicated because everybody knows what. Well, no, I won't go there. Many people know what could be, and I think the left, that's what they have on point. They're very much, this is what should, could, and possibly could be. Right. The right are, this is what is. Yeah. This is where we're at. Yeah. Versus these ideas.
I have to exist in this world now. Yeah. I can't live in that future world.
Especially the middle class, right?
Problems.
Like the working class.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Because that's why it's so fucking hard, and that's why it comes back to how much energy do you have to put into something? When you still have to work 40 hours a week just to maintain the status quo, how much extra energy do you have to fight child prostitution in your neighborhood?
What do you give a shit? Because I'm just trying to pay my rent, man.
And
I'm just trying to put food on my table for my own kids.
How many extra hobbies do you have if you don't have kids? You know what I mean? And especially if you got kids, all of a sudden, no, what I do is work to exist, and I have kids, and occasionally I get to do something that I enjoy that doesn't give back to anything. I'll go play a fucking round of golf,
Saturday
or I'll
night,
go fishing, go drink and get fucking play bowling, you know what I mean? Like shit like that, just to get through. And then that's my time back for me, because I already did these things. And again, we can justify it by saying, well, I'm still earning money, which pays taxes, which helps in these areas, so that's how I can do that. But that's, again, kind of how it's designed to keep us at odds with that, right?
Yes. And that's just it. And that's feudalism. It's feudalism.
If I'm worried about my tax dollars doing something well, instead of paying them into the government, I should almost work less, use those hours, and then put them into a community program that I want.
100%.
Because you see more result,
Live
right?
poor and go volunteer at a soup kitchen.
But
versus
how do you get a house then? How do you have a reliable vehicle? How do you get through fucking school? How do you even occasionally do something that's just fun and you feel like you earned?
Yeah. Well, and that's... man, like
it's hard.
We're living in some
hard. It's hard to do
times.
it guilt free, also, right? If you're conscious of it, and then once you become, it's like me, you know, like I know I shouldn't bought goddamn chicken on a fucking way here, you know what I mean? Like the shit like that I know is bad for me and I shouldn't do it, but I just feel like shit and I fucking want it and I'm gonna do it and I can't.
And that's exactly it.
It's
like I'm
selfish
feeling
and
rough,
shitty,
and
it's gonna hurt me, and it's gonna hurt the chicken, and it's gonna hurt everybody else who's involved in the process. Other than they might have a job, which helps them to continue and fucking participate in this bullshit system. That's not a lot of solace for me.
It's happiness. Consumerism is happiness. There's all these avenues that they
endorphins,
try to sell you.
Something new, something flavorful, salt, sugar, fat.
All of it. Hope.
That's what I exist on.
Lotteries. Here, buy happiness. Buy happiness. Here's your chance to, because this system is designed to keep you unhappy. Now, what happens if
we were all just complacent? Hey, if we're all just like, no, I'm comfortable. I make plenty of money. Everything's going good. That fucking my family's always fed. I'm always happy. Why would you strive for more? Why would you continue to do a job that you're like, you know what? I kind of fucking hate this job.
See, and I think that's the problem when we look outside that matrix, and we start looking at why we're doing what we're doing. Is it really giving us our true will? Are we really following our bliss in our life? Or are we just grinding for the sake of social niceties, keeping up with the Joneses? And, for other people, why do I choose the clothes I wear? Wow. So other people will think that I fit into a certain social strata?
The cosmic fucking scheme of things, it's like, well, how and what am I doing? Is that positive towards my cosmic experience? If I am to learn lessons in this life going around, how am I doing these mundane fucking things every day? How is that helping me do that?
Well, right. And like, how do you get out of it? How do you get out of it? And I think that mindfulness meditation might be a step, because that will all of a sudden click you into saying, wow, a lot of this stuff is arbitrary and useless. Psychedelics would be another trip where you can't help. You're going to get there where they're like, wow, these are some pretty arbitrary institutions.
And screaming and vomiting.
There's a really good short film by Steve Steve Cutts named Happiness, and it's the rat race, you know. And
Happiness?
So, happiness, and the guy's named Steve Cutts. If you look up happiness, yeah, that's the word. Anyway,
Happiness.
happiness.
Are you saying a penis to me, sir?
Steve Cutts does a lot of really good short films. Cutts. You could find his stuff on YouTube. You take a look, and it's a lot of social commentary. And the guy's really sharp. He's an animator, and he does like these like maybe 5-10 minute little films. You probably recognize some if you look him up. But he really basically we grind, and we're grinding so much because that carrot on a stick is being dangled in front of us. Like, this will give you joy. This will give you
sometimes
happiness.
you see grinders who are also sociopaths succeed in whatever the thing is you're passionate about too.
Because they're making me first.
Yeah.
Fuck everybody else, me first.
Pick a professional athlete who's on top of the goddamn world. I just think of Conor McGregor. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah, fuck.
they're more of a me first motherfucker in the room.
Well, and they're rewarded. This system rewards the me first, and it takes away from the us first.
But you're only allowed to live like that when you're at that level also. If you think like that on the way up and you act like that the whole time, sometimes you get checked and all of a sudden you get put into fucking jail.
But well, it depends if you're committing crimes. As long as you work within the framework
if
of
you're
legality,
working on that
right?
me, my, take.
Well, you know, used car salesman to boot. You know what I mean? Financing, you know, all the doodads. You need the undercoating. You need all of that stuff. Just sign. Trust me, it's a great deal. I'm going to sell you a great deal. The
Mike, I sold this 5 times today. I can't believe you don't want it.
Yeah, I got other people waiting online. If you don't buy it, somebody else's. And they lie through their teeth. They get you to sign. They take your money. They get their commission. They do it again. Wolf of Wall Street is a perfect example. The guy fucking hustled, and became like super rich by not giving a fuck about anybody but himself, and in his entire life. Yeah, it's a
And how biblical is that shit?
yeah,
Right?
the karma. But then you get to a certain level, and these guys get fucking busted, and they get months instead of years. They get like a slap on the wrist. They like white collar criminals get nothing. Blue collar criminals, they get like a stay. Poor criminals, they're gone, and that's some pretty fucked up shit.
You're into the slave system now. Well, and again, I think that's partially because if you constantly punished white collar criminals at the same level you did the poor, they would have lawyers that would fight back and go, no, this is unfucking just. This is uncaused. You can't put me in jail for 20 fucking years for something that's legal the next state over. You can't do that, you know. But it's kind of happening a little bit now, and I hope more of it does. I hope they do start to try to make examples out of more of these uppity riches of pick a thing that you don't want to fucking take over your neighborhood, because that's what they're doing. And those guys are going, okay, cool. No, I got a bunch of zeros behind my fucking name now, so I can fight back as much as I want. Everybody else looked like we couldn't. I can now.
What would happen to Ghislaine or Epstein if he lived on 23rd and P? And they caught him for the exact same shit, man. Like, that guy would be away. Like, but you got your own island, and you got like 5 different mansions all the way around the world.
There'd have been decades less abuse.
Yeah, exactly. They just like, boom, you're done. And so these people are insulated. It's almost like this system is engineered to protect and serve sociopaths. You know, and I think like the more ethical and compassionate you are, the less you get anywhere in society. And you, I'm friends with a lot of social workers that do like outreach work with kids, drug addicts, youth at need, you know, families that are trying to struggle, and they watch. It's an uphill fight.
They're doing real positive work, and they still have to worry about making their car payments all the time.
They're living borderline
actually
poor.
Changing society, yeah. Still
they
can't
don't
have a house that's big enough so they can have a dog too.
They don't have enough money to feed the kids, to house these people that need this, like women in need that need to get away from a bad situation. Where do we put them? There's nowhere to put them. Like there's no social safety net.
Motherfucker's got 9 yachts.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do we put them? This dude's got 9 yachts. Stick him on a yacht.
Move him to Bezos' fucking acreage in the middle of LA. You fucking goof. Anyways, yeah. So that's today, I guess. Yeah.
And then on a high note.
What do we got? Hour and a half?
Just about 2 hours.
Okay, so that's
Too
good.
much.
Yeah.
Too much.
Thanks for listening to us today. It's been a little while. We kind of went all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Never talked about anything on the table again, which I like.
Yeah, lots of weapons here. Yeah. Anyways,
Bunch of things that look like ordinary implements there.
Sex toys.
Could definitely. Oh, Jesus Christ.
depends on the type of sex you have, Russ.
Yeah.
They can be sex toys.
Kind of window into me.
Or you wanted to put a window into you? Can be done, my friend.
Anything's a dildo if you're brave enough.
Oh, wow.
All right.
That's the title of the episode.
Yes. Okay. Yes, it is. I love you guys. All right. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.